Chapter 442. Su Li's eyes flashed, and she said, "Are you a living person?" The middle-aged puppet smiled and shook his head. "I'm just a sub-awareness stored in the puppet's body." Before that, Su Li hesitated to speak. The middle-aged puppet said slowly, "That's your fate, and I won't stop you. But since you can break through, it shows that you are tough enough to inherit my mantle. If not, I won't show up." Su Li was silent for a moment and said coldly, "How do you know that I will accept your mantle?" "Ha ha ha ha." The middle-aged man laughed. "I won't force you. If you don't want to, just refuse. But I can see that you are interested in the lineage of sword." Su Li's eyes flashed, and she smiled. "Senior, you are right. Then, please enlighten me." The middle-aged man nodded gently with a gentle smile on his face. "Attack me with the sword you comprehended." Su Li's eyes narrowed, and the long sword in her hand immediately turned into lightning. A touch of faint black thought lingered around her. Clang, 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 clang. The crisp collision of the two swords sounded continuously, mixed with the gentle teaching of the middle-aged man. "I don't know where your soul has been. It has been transformed in advance, and it has reached the perfect realm of the nature soul. This realm can affect the reality, but it is not good for you to comprehend the intent of sword. Just now, the arbitrator of nature soul said that the sword is the obsession. You have comprehended it, but it is wrong. The obsession is not the mind." Su Li's sword stopped, and the black light in her eyes quickly faded. The middle-aged man showed a gratified expression. "Why do you hold the sword? What I want is not your simple thought, but your thought of using the sword. Do you understand?" "No." Su Li gritted her teeth, and the sword in her hand attacked tirelessly, but was repeatedly blocked by the middle-aged puppet. After dispersing the thought of nature soul, she tasted the feeling of blankness in her mind again. Blankness again and again, and slowly, she heard many voices in the dark. "Li, are you willing to be my wife? Li, no matter whether you like me or not, I'm determined to follow you." "Master, your life ring has been broken. I'm sorry. Is it worth it to trade your life for your child's future?" "Fake. The whole world is fake. Senior sister, you're just a tool that can be discarded after being used. Do you really think anyone will like you? The heavenly Tao would never allow such a person to be born naturally. Therefore, from the moment you were born, you were deliberately arranged by someone. Until the heavens were angry and the people resented you, you died a horrible death. You won't have a good ending." "Ah." In the calm sky, an enraged cry of despair suddenly resounded, and it was like a cuckoo crying blood and filled the sky with sorrow. The ordinary longsword was instantly coated with a layer of black flames. It was filled with a destructive aura as it slashed towards the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's expression suddenly changed, and he didn't dare to conserve his strength any longer. A purple light quickly condensed on his sword, and he barely managed to block this sword. However, the puppet was caught by a trace of black flame, and it instantly started burning. The middle-aged man's face changed again and again. He had to give up his physical body and retreat to the nothingness, watching Su Li madly wielding her sword alone on the high platform. Ao's sword skills, Suashing, Suayu tactics, and other high-level swordsmanship mixed together, rippling in the void. This is destruction sword essence? The middle-aged man's sub-awareness hidden in the nothingness saw this scene, and his face showed horror. How could it be? Destruction? What kind of despair is hidden in this woman's heart, and she even wants to destroy everything? The middle-aged man's face was grave, and he began to realize the seriousness of the matter. If a person who understood such a sword essence was not in the right state of mind, what kind of disaster would it bring to the cultivation circle? What kind of evildoer have I attracted? I didn't expect that I would commit such a sin after my death. It's God's will. The middle-aged man was full of bitterness. He was just a sub-awareness, and he couldn't affect the operation of the star path. A few days later, Su Li's pneuma, genuine energy, and physical strength were all exhausted. She could only lie on the high platform and gasp. Her blood-stained clothes were soaked with sweat, and she looked like a pawn who had just survived from the battlefield. The middle-aged man's sub-awareness slowly approached. Looking at Suli, who had lost her destructive power, he sighed softly. After a few breaths, Suli's physical strength recovered a little, and she got up from the ground. After a moment of silence, she deeply bowed to the middle-aged man. Seeing this, the middle-aged man sighed more heavily. You can go. I won't give you my mantle. The skills you have learned are too messy, and every one of them can set off a reign of terror in the eyes of the world. If my inheritance falls into your hands, it is likely that it will disappear in the world soon. Suli reluctantly showed a smile and said calmly, I understand. Seeing the smile on her face, the middle-aged man was slightly stunned. You understand what? I know what you are worried about, but those are things of a long time ago. Now I just want to find out the truth. It would be best if I don't kill. But if someone stops me, I can't do anything. Suli smiled gently, as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her. The middle-aged man was silent again. He had cultivated for tens of thousands of years before his death, and he had seen many people and encountered many things, but he had never seen a woman as strange as Suli. She clearly had resentment in her heart, and she could even understand the destruction sword essence, but she could still keep a clear mind. Such a person. The middle-aged man glanced at his transparent hands and suddenly laughed freely. I'm a man in the grave, and I don't care about the righteousness of the world. Haven't I suffered enough in my life? As he spoke, his expression turned serious. Little girl, what you've learned are the best mental cultivation methods and sword techniques in the world. Coupled with your sword intent, you're invincible among those of the same level, and you can even kill those of a higher level. But when I look at what you've learned, I find that you're still lacking something. Suli nodded and was not surprised. I lack a killing move. I understand. Ho ho! The middle-aged man smiled and took out a transparent bead from his chest. With your intelligence, you must have thought of it long ago. I will give you my inheritance. You can use it yourself, or give it to someone you like. It's up to you. But there is a sword move that is not in the inheritance, and it can only be taught by me. Suli raised her eyebrows. A killing move? The middle-aged man laughed. Of course, and it's quite powerful. An hour later, the shadow of the middle-aged man dissipated and turned into specks of starlight that melted into the nothingness. Suli watched this scene quietly, and then she bowed and said softly, Goodbye, senior. As the starlight completely melted into the nothingness, Suli's slightly warm face became cold again, and she said slowly, I have passed the 18th step of Star Path. Now I ask for the gift of Star Path to be infused to break through to Jindan realm. As soon as she said this, a cold voice sounded in the nothingness. As you wish. Whoosh! The stone steps that had disappeared emerged one by one, and a strange luster gushed out from the 5th step. After leaving the stone steps, it condensed into a huge ball in the nothingness. After a pause, it suddenly rushed to Suli and wrapped her whole body in it, turning her into a transparent cocoon. Suli slowly closed her eyes like an old monk meditating, and began to absorb the pure power in it with ease and concentration. Shortly after she meditated, a white light flashed and stared at the cocoon with burning eyes. It turned out to be the arbitration of natural soul. Old sword, you found yourself a pretty good successor. Suli's absorption lasted for several years. As time went by, the transparent cocoon gradually shrunk, and finally only a layer of skin was left. At a certain moment, Suli suddenly opened her eyes and counted with her fingers. She found that she had stayed here for 10 years. It's time to go out. Suli calmly looked at the star gate at the end of Star Path and looked at the round Jindan in the center of her pubic region. Then she slipped into the star gate and disappeared without hesitation. In the core of the tea plant, Black Lotus was still cursing. The reincarnation mirror looked sick and floated in the nothingness. No one knew what had happened during this time. All of a sudden, a star gate was constructed, and Suli, who looked like a beggar, walked out of it in ragged clothes and hair. Swish, swish, swish. Black Lotus ring, reincarnation mirror, nightmare, and all the other treasures returned in an instant. Black Lotus was stunned when he saw Suli, and then he seemed to see a ghost. Suli, you are back? Suli frowned slightly and asked, How long has it been? It's only been an hour. Black Lotus shouted. An hour. My master, what did you do on the star path? You set a record for the shortest time to get out of the star path. Did the master of the star path look down on you and kick you out directly? That shouldn't be the case. I have never heard of anyone who failed in the star path and came out alive. Suli stopped listening to Black Lotus's chatter and was slightly surprised. 10 years in an hour? The time conversion this time was even more exaggerated than last time. But except for the rebellious spiritual body, everything else was normal. Is it because I invited the arbitration of nature soul? Suli couldn't understand why there were accidents every time on her star path. Fortunately, no matter how difficult the process was, she came out successfully. Thinking of this, Suli turned over her palm, and a transparent light ball appeared in her palm. Before Black Lotus could see what it was, she put it away. Little Suli, tell me what you encountered on the star path. I was chased all the way to the 17th step and almost died there. Finally, I invited the arbitration of nature soul to survive. Tell me the truth. After playing with Black Lotus for a while, Suli's heart seemed to be less heavy. After taking back the Tsanglei's cave, she walked out of the core main gate of the tea plant. She already knew some ways to use the nature soul, so she was not as cautious as before. According to the words of Senior Sword, the perfect nature soul was extremely rare even in Huashan Realm. In Yushu sect, if she wanted to meet someone in Huashan Realm, she had to break into the forbidden area. Suli, you came out so soon? On the tea peak, Black Lotus looked at the disciples who passed by Suli without noticing, and his heart trembled. If they were exposed, it was unknown whether they could escape or not. Suli was too bold. Suli did not answer. She turned a corner on the mountain road, and a chill suddenly came to her face. Chapter 443. Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. The chain rubbed on the stone surface and made a harsh sound. A haggard woman came to them. She was wet, and her clothes were dripping with water. It seemed that she had just been fished out of the river. Her hair was disheveled, and she looked like a forbidden woman. Beside her, Fong Ling was holding her and walking slowly. These two people, Black Lotus made a sound in the awareness sea. Suli narrowed her eyes. Mei Ruhan and Fong Ling were all acquaintances. She watched them silently and let them get close to each other. Then, they passed each other. Senior Sister Apprentice, you haven't seen the sun for many years. It's sunny today and the weather is just nice. Master ordered me to take you to tidy up your appearance. Senior Sister Apprentice, you should cherish this opportunity. Fong Ling whispered softly on one side. Many female disciples dressed as maids followed her all the way, holding bright red clothes and phoenix coronets in their hands. Suli's eyes flickered slightly. She turned around and followed the last maid. She blended into the team like a transparent person. After a while, they came to a magnificent hall. Suli looked up at the plaque of the palace, which read Lingyu Hall. She slightly twitched the corner of her mouth. On the Mount of Holy Girl, this palace used to be called Linli Hall. As the maids walked into the hall, a cold pneuma came to Suli, which vaguely made her feel familiar. Fong Ling had helped the haggard woman to sit down in front of the dressing table. The maids stood around them. This palace was originally Senior Sister's. If Senior Sister hadn't chosen this path back then, Fong Ling nagged. Before she finished, Mei Ruhan, who had been like a zombie, finally said hoarsely enough. Fong Ling was not angry. She just waved her hand and said, "Put down everything. You go out first. I will personally help you bathe and change clothes." The leader of the group of maids hesitated a little. Then she put down the tray in her hand and left with all the maids. After everyone left, the smile on Fong Ling's face disappeared. She waved her hand to set a soundproof boundary, but did not see that Suli was sitting beside the dresser and watching them from beginning to end. Senior Sister, this is your last chance. Brother Luo's identity will be exposed very soon. If you don't grab hold of it, you can only stay in the underground ice prison for the rest of your life. Brother Luo's painstaking efforts will be wasted. Mei Ruhan stared blankly at the haggard face in the mirror and said coldly, "How many benefits did you receive from Luo Yichen?" Fong Ling was slightly stunned. Tears gradually appeared in her eyes. She bit her lips and held back her tears. Senior Sister, It has been 1,000 years. Why do you still take it to heart? I know that you must care about Brother Luo and everyone in the Leanly building, right? Mei Ruhan smiled sadly and said, The Leanly building? I am not me, and he is not him. The only real Suli was killed by me. Why should I take it to heart? Aren't you still calling me senior sister? Let me ask you, which Fong Ling are you? Which one? Fong Ling held her breath and was full of bitterness. After a long time, she took a deep breath and said softly, I don't know, but I know that the senior sister apprentice in Qing Shui's circle has died. You are pure Mei Ruhan. Why do you continue to feel guilty for that evil thought? Now, you have to live. If you continue to stay in the ice prison, you can't hold on for a long time. Fong Ling wiped her tears and said, That's all. Senior sister apprentice, think about it. Then she turned and left the palace, leaving Mei Ruhan sitting alone in front of the dresser and lost in thought. At this moment, a light flashed in front of the dresser and Su Li's figure appeared. In order to let Mei Ruhan recognize her, she even used all spirits tactics to change her face into the appearance of her previous life. Mei Ruhan was not surprised to see her at all. She just muttered with a smile, I think too much, but I don't see any benefits. But I often see hallucinations. Tell me, what do you hate me for this time? Hate you? Su Li said softly and seriously. What do I hate you for? Mei Ruhan's eyes showed self-mockery. This time I changed the trick. Is it your turn to ask me? Then let me tell you. You hate me for destroying your life ring. I cut off your cultivation path. Every time you appear, you bleed from your 7 apertures. You can't wait to eat my flesh and blood, immediately turn into ashes, and never be reincarnated. Speaking of this, Mei Ruhan suddenly opened her hands and laughed hoarsely. Come on, my life is here. Li, take it. Whether it's a mountain of knives or a sea of fire, I'm willing to do it. It's all my sins. Fong Ling stood in front of the hall and listened to the voice coming from the hall. Her eyes flickered, but there were no tears. Beside her, the leading maid stared at her without anyone noticing. From time to time, she could hear the whispers of the other maids. The previous saintess has gone crazy again. She's talking to herself, crying and laughing. How many times has it been? Just get used to it. I heard that the former holy girl married a good family. I really envy her. Silence. The leading maid's voice was a little louder and suppressed all the whispers. Then she bowed to Fong Ling respectfully and retreated with all the maids to a farther place. In the hall, Su Li stared at Mei Ruhan without blinking. Until Mei Ruhan felt a little strange. She suddenly chuckled. Ruhan, you are wrong. I don't hate you. Mei Ruhan trembled all over and looked at Su Li incredulously. Her lips trembled and she opened her mouth several times, but she couldn't make a sound. Finally, she suddenly thought of something and suddenly sat up straight. She slowly stretched out her cold hands and wanted to touch Su Li. But Su Li dodged and let it go. Plop! There was a sound of a stool overturning in the hall. Fong Ling still stayed outside and didn't go in. Mei Ruhan lay on the ground and propped herself up. She looked up at the familiar figure squatting in front of her and said in a hoarse voice, Are you real? What's real and what's fake? What's fake is real. You have punished yourself for 1,000 years, but you still haven't figured it out. I can't figure it out either. Su Li's tone was gentle, just like in the Muyang girls' school. Every word she said was so calm and contained a convincing force. Mei Ruhan's eyes were full of tears. She couldn't speak anymore. Only a strong sense of guilt and remorse slowly spread in the air. I really don't blame you. From the moment your original soul dissipated, you were Mei Ruhan. I hate a lot. I hate Yushu Sek's selfishness. They used me as a tool and abandoned me after using me. I hate the behind-the-scenes manipulator who manipulated my life and made my death worthless. I hate the world even more. Why didn't they allow me to be born and turn a blind eye to me and let me bring disaster to the world? There is unwillingness and despair in my heart. But I still have a trace of warmth for you at the beginning. I am very happy to see you are still alive. Live well, Ruhan. With the last sentence, Su Li's figure dissipated as if she had never appeared. Mei Ruhan was in a daze. After a long time, she burst into tears. In the village under the Jiuzhou mountain range, Suli looked relaxed. She held a stick of candied haws in her hand and shuttled through the busy night market. It seemed that she returned to the temple fair in the Desu town overnight. It was simple and pure, but Suli knew that everything could not go back. Little Suli, you didn't have to show up just now. Why? Don't tell me you really have good intentions towards them? They stayed by your side in the reincarnation mirror and were the ones who obtained the most luck. Suli ate a stick of candied haws, and the sweet and sour taste spread in her mouth. She closed her eyes contentedly and said to herself with a smile, I haven't eaten it for a long time. It tastes good. Suli, you haven't answered me yet. Black Lotus's face was full of anger, and he was on the verge of exploding. Was his sense of existence that low? Why was he always ignored by Suli? Don't guess my mind in the future. It's very tiring. After that, Suli quickly passed through a section of the downtown and ran to the street of the lantern show. Black Lotus looked tired and complained in his heart, You are more than 2,000 years old, but you still jump when walking. Do you really think that you are a girl? Of course, he never dared to say this in the open. A month later, Suli returned to an insect, which only Hua Yin knew. It had been 2 months since Su Yang and Su Mu came to an insect. How did they do? Suli threw a storage space to Hua Yin. The spiritual flowers and herbs found along the way look good. Try to put them into the Hualing pool, which is also good for your cultivation. Hua Yin rolled her eyes grumpily. You risked your life to go to Yushu sect, but you still remembered to bring flowers and herbs. You really want to die. Although her words were sharp, Hua Yin was happy in her heart. She answered seriously, The two of them are quite talented. They are almost on the same level as Yinzai. Moreover, the three of them have been getting along with each other for the past 2 months. Yinzai seems to know them. There are only a few holy sections. It is normal for holy sect's disciples to communicate with each other. Suli smiled and continued to ask, Anything else? Hua Yin shook her head. Nothing. An I sect has Su Yuanhai's support, so it is very comfortable. Usually, the disciples of the sect will meet some people for the tasks of demons and monsters, but there is no other battle. But Su Yuanhai. Suli raised her eyebrows. What's wrong with Su Yuanhai? He is not in a good situation recently. The 6th branch of Su family is competing with him for a spiritual stone mine, and they are fighting fiercely recently. The other branches of the Su family have all turned a blind eye to this and have not interfered. What about the 2nd branch? Suli remembered Su Dain, who had a very good attitude to her before. Although the 2nd branch of Su family was still in the belly of the nightmare and did not go back, Su Dain would not fall out with them according to her character. Hua Yin sighed. She wants to intervene, but the 3rd branch, the 4th branch, and the 5th branch work together to pressure her, so she can't intervene. I don't know what the head of the 6th branch of Su family likes about the spiritual stone mine, but its geographical location is a little special, and all the spiritual stones produced are low-grade spiritual stones. Logically, it should be even more disdainful. Special location? Suli sensed something wrong and asked, Where is the spiritual stone mine? Hua Yin took a deep breath and said solemnly, It is the Black Stone Forest. Chapter 444. Suli was slightly shocked. She immediately thought of the extremely obscure peeping gaze in the Black Stone Forest. She had always known that there was something strange in the Black Stone Forest, but she had no time to take care of it because of too many things. But now, it was related to the 7th branch of the Su family. Su Yuanhai was the key for her to control the Su family, so she couldn't ignore it. There is too little information. Su Dain should know a lot. Suli frowned and pondered for a moment. Then she whispered, Who else came back except Su Yang and Su Mu, who went to the tea party for immortals? Hua Yin nodded. Of course. But after hearing Su Yang's description, I was afraid that it was a camouflage released by the 25 sections. So, I sent someone to investigate it secretly and found that 80% of it was a camouflage. 80%? Suli caught the point at once and said, That is to say, someone really came back. Hua Yin sneered and said, Yushu sect deliberately covered up the secret. Many of those who entered that place were the descendants of spoilers in the Jiuzhou region. There must be a few who were released through the back door. Of course, they claimed that they came out alive from the test. In addition to those who went through the back door, there were also many like you who found the secret and broke through Yuanying realm to make trouble. Finally, they were sent back. Su Yang and Su Mu had the cultivation of Yuanying realm, which was not known by the Su family. If you let them go back to the Su family, no one will feel strange. Seeing that Hua Yin investigated the matter so clearly, Su Li smiled and said, "You are still the same as before. You like to do things to the extreme, and even I can't find any flaws." Hua Yin rolled her eyes and giggled. "If it weren't for the support of the Grand Elder, I couldn't have done it." Su Li scolded with a smile. "Come on, go to practice." "I know, Grand Elder, I'm going now." Hua Yin picked up the universe ring and was about to walk out of the addendum. Suddenly, she heard a slightly low voice behind her slowly. "If that day comes, don't worry about me." Hua Yin stopped and waved her hand without looking back. She smiled and said, "Don't think about making me regret for the second time. I'm leaving." Early the next morning, Su Yang and Su Mu received a sound transmission from Su Li, ordering them to return to the Su family. Su Yang rolled out of bed and rubbed his head in distress. "Go back? If we go back and that old fellow from the Su family finds out about us, wouldn't that be courting death?" Su Mu held the carrier rune in his hand thoughtfully. Su Jiuzhou had returned to an ice sect. When did it happen? Why didn't anyone tell them? What did Su Jiuzhou's sudden sound transmission mean? One last test? Say something, you blockhead. Su Yang angrily moved closer to Su Mu's face. He stared at Su Mu and almost stuck his eyes on Su Mu's face. What he hated most was talking to a blockhead, but he had no one else he could trust except Su Mu. Su Mu put away the carrier rune and looked up at Su Yang, who was close at hand. He said slowly, "Go back." Su Yang suddenly had a headache. After howling unwillingly for a while, he finally became listless and said weakly, "That's what you said. If I lose my life, I'll compensate you." Su Mu said expressionlessly. At the same time, Su Xianyun and the other two stood in the wilderness in a daze. They were all confused. After a long time, Su Zhang said with astonishment, "We escaped just like that?" Su Xianyun was awakened by his voice and shouted, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and find Su Jiuzhou. She was not far from us at that time. She must be nearby." Su Wenbing sighed and asked Su Zhang and the other two to search separately. Not long after, they found Su Li in ragged clothes, who was unconscious in a bush. Su Li hadn't changed her clothes since she came out of the star path. Now it came in handy. The memories of Su Xianyun and the other two were naturally rewoven by her. They were completely different from the moment before they met Su Yang. In their eyes, it was Su Li who showed great power and led them to escape from the pursuit of the 100-person team. Then she forcibly broke through to Yuanying realm at a great cost and fought with the enemy. She broke the space and got a chance to negotiate. Finally, the four of them left the chaos zone through the vortex. All the memories were Su Li's personal experience. 80% of them were true. Su Xianyun and the other two accepted the memory immediately. Therefore, after the three of them woke up, they were anxious to find Su Li. It was a great favor to take them out of the chaos zone. After the three of them were busy for a while, Su Li finally woke up. She smiled with a pale face and propped herself up to sit up. Su Xianyun and the other two looked terrible. When they healed Su Li, they found that Su Li's pubic region was empty. Her meridians were broken, and her qi and blood were weak. She was even worse than ordinary mortals. The price of forcibly breaking through to Yuanying realm was losing all her cultivation. Su Xianyun took a deep breath and was full of guilt. He thought the so-called price was only serious injuries. He didn't expect that Su Jiuzhou would. "Why do you all look like you're dead?" "I'm not dead yet." Su Li pretended to be angry. "Isn't it just losing all my cultivation? I'll just cultivate again." Su Xianyun and the other two nodded fiercely. "We'll go back now. Please ask the master to give you the best environment for recultivation." Su Li smiled indifferently, but there was a touch of worry in her eyes. She hesitated for a moment and said, I'd better not go." Su Xianyun was stunned, and then said solemnly, "Su Jiuzhou, what are you thinking? My master is never an ungrateful person. Besides, you are a member of the second branch now. Head, why do you continue to annoy the old ancestor? That is a major event related to the survival of the entire Qingshui circle. It's a pity that Xian Yun and the others died, but their death is not worthless. Su Dain sneered and still said nothing. Seeing that his persuasion didn't work, the white-bearded elder sitting on the right with a smile said warmly, "Second branch head, don't be impatient. I came here from the main branch to tell you a piece of good news. It's not impossible to die in that place. Just a few days ago, the two hidden talents of our main branch, Su Yang and Su Mu, both came back alive from the Chaos Zone." As soon as this was said, everyone's face changed. Even Su Dain couldn't keep calm and asked, "Did the old ancestor take action?" The white-bearded elder shook his head with a smile. "Of course not. Those two juniors aren't the direct descendants of our ancestor. How could they have made a move? It was one of them who broke through to the nascent soul stage and caused a disturbance inside. The two sides didn't want the space to continue to be damaged, so they let them out." Hearing this, Su Dain was silent with bitterness in her heart. She knew her three apprentices very well. There was no sign of them breaking through the elixir realm. They were not even half a step to Yuanying realm. Unless there was a miracle, it was impossible for them to break through to Yuanying realm. She was silent, but the rest of the elders were relieved and echoed one after another, "That's great. I watched Su Xianyun and the other two grow up. They don't look like short-lived people. Maybe they can take advantage of this opportunity to break through to Yuanying realm and become the youngest elder of our second branch." Yes, yes. Looking at the faces of the elders, Su Dain only felt disgusted and was about to speak. Suddenly, the door of the addendum was pushed open. A young elder who didn't participate in the meeting came to the table with a happy face and said quickly, "Head, great news. Su Xianyun and the other two are back." Su Dain was stunned for a moment. She suddenly stood up with her eyes shining. "Is it true?" "Of course, they have returned home and are recuperating in the back hall." Su Dain couldn't sit still immediately. She bowed to the white-bearded elder who was stunned and squinted with a smile. "Thank you for your kind words, elder. I have to go to see my apprentices. I have to go now." The white-bearded elder reacted quickly and returned the salute with a smile. "I understand that the head of the second branch cares about his apprentices. Go ahead." "Thank you." Su Dain hurried away without looking back. The white-bearded elder looked at the other elders of the second branch who were also full of joy, and his face darkened slightly. Even Su Dain's apprentices had broken through to Yuanying realm. The threat of the second branch to the main branch was getting greater and greater. "I must report this to the old ancestor." Regardless of what the white-bearded elder thought, Su Dain hurried to the back hall and pushed open the door of the wing room. Before she had time to react, she saw Su Xianyun and the other two standing side by side and kneeling in front of her. Chapter 445. What are you doing? Seeing that they were not seriously injured, Su Dain felt relieved and asked, "Master, please save Su Jiuzhou." "Su Jiuzhou?" Su Dain opened her beautiful eyes slightly and turned around. She finally saw Su Jiuzhou meditating in the inner room. Compared with Su Xianyun and the other two who were neatly dressed, her clothes were so ragged that she could be described as a beggar. The pungent smell of blood made Su Dain frown. "Master, Su Jiuzhou saved all of us." While Su Xianyun was talking about the ins and outs, Su Dain had already walked to Su Jiuzhou and felt Su Li's pulse. She frowned more tightly. "Xianyun, why didn't you contact me before coming back?" Su Dain's voice was slightly cold, and the temperature in the air seemed to drop a lot in an instant. Xianyun was stunned and immediately smiled bitterly. "Master, our storage rooms were all lost in the Chaos Zone, so we couldn't contact you." Su Dain glanced at the empty fingers of the three and sighed softly. Many people in the second branch saw Su Jiuzhou, who had lost all her cultivation. "Sorry for the trouble." At this time, Su Li's eyelashes trembled and she opened her eyes. After seeing Su Dain, she was slightly frightened and was about to stand up to salute, but was stopped by Su Dain. "You are seriously injured, so you don't have to salute." Su Li heard the words and showed gratitude in her eyes. Thank you, Senior. Don't call me Senior. Su Dian said seriously and stared at Su Li. Call me Master. Su Li was slightly stunned and immediately smiled. She didn't misjudge her. What are you laughing at? Su Dian was puzzled and waved her hand to let Su Xianyun and the other two go out first. Then she set up a soundproof boundary and said in a deep voice, the second branch is not united. One branch is led by me, and the other branch is led by the first elder, Su Dingxian. If you were not seen by the second branch, it would be very easy for me to save you under the guise of rescuing Xianyun and the others with resources. But you went back to the second branch rashly. Su Li was silent. Of course, she knew the pros and cons, so she specially took the universe rings of Su Xianyun and the other two. Su Dian sighed slightly and said softly, I need a nominal master and disciple relationship to save you. If you don't want to take me as your master, I won't force you. Just pretend to call me master in front of outsiders. I recruited you into the second branch myself, and you saved Xianyun and the others. I should save you. Su Li showed a wry smile and said half-truthfully, Thank you for your kindness, Jojo. It's just that I still have an unresolved dispute with my former master, so taking him as my master is a taboo for me. I know my own injuries. Why do you have to? From what you said, I'll take it that you've agreed to my proposal. Su Dian didn't listen to Su Li's explanation. She gently pushed away the messy bloody hair that covered Su Li's eyes and chuckled. Go take a bath and change your clothes. You used to be a practitioner of Yuanying realm anyway. Don't make yourself so embarrassed. Remember to call me master in front of outsiders. As for your injuries, don't worry, I'll think of a way. Su Li watched Su Dian go away in a daze. At this moment, she had an illusion. Since her rebirth, no matter what she did, no matter what the process was, she could get a good result in the end. And her luck in meeting people seemed to be more than 100 times better than in her previous life. Imochin's gentle face flashed in Su Li's mind. Her eyes were slightly gloomy, and she muttered to herself, Master. In Yushu sect, she didn't go to Elixir Mount to see her, although she knew that she could swagger into the familiar palace. But she didn't dare to. Soon after Su Dian left, 2 teams of maids came in with clothes and buckets to carefully help Su Li take a bath and change her clothes. 4 hours later, Su Li sat in front of the dressing table, wearing a purple gauze dress that was unique to Su Dian's direct disciple. Her hair was simply tied with a purple hairband, which was clean and refreshing. Su Li was dressed in ordinary clothes, and her face even looked a little childish, but she had an indescribable, profound temperament. Su Li looked in the mirror and touched the lotus mark at the corner of her eyes with her fingers. She narrowed her eyes slightly. At this time, another old man in a black robe, who looked like a steward, came in from the door of the back hall. He bowed deeply to Su Li and said respectfully, Lord Jojo, your courtyard has been cleaned up. Will you go there now? Su Li turned her head and showed a gentle smile. Thank you, steward. Where are Su Xianyun and others? The old man in a black robe was immediately flattered, and he couldn't help but speak with real respect. Lord Xianyun and others are in their own courtyards, which are not far from your courtyard. Would you like to visit them? I can lead the way. Su Li nodded gratefully. Thank you, steward. May I know your name? The old man in a black robe smiled bitterly and bowed. You really don't deserve this. Just call me old Su, lady. Su Li waved her hand to dismiss the maids around her. She stood up and walked through the door and said with a smile, Elder Su, you don't have to do this. I am seriously injured, and now I am just an ordinary mortal. I don't deserve your courtesy. Hearing this, the eyes of the old man in a black robe changed instantly. He reacted quickly and led Su Li out of the back hall. After a while, Su Li saw the courtyard that the old man in a black robe mentioned. It was built on a separate small peak, covering an area of thousands of hectares. The whole hilltop was flattened and planted with all kinds of spiritual flowers and herbs. Many handymen could be seen working in the flower field. It was not so much a courtyard, but a manor with a lofty status. This thought flashed through Su Li's mind, and her eyes flickered slightly. In this way, it could cause more dissatisfaction in the second branch. When Su Dingxia's branch lost its patience, it would be her chance. Lady, that is the residence of Lord Xianyun. The old man in a black robe pointed to a vast manor on the peak not far away and asked, "Shall we go there now?" Su Li gasped slightly and looked a little tired. She waved her hand and said, "I am a little tired, so I don't want to bother you, Elder Su." The old man in a black robe smiled slightly. "What are you talking about, lady? Since you are here, I will leave now. Yao take the lady inside to have a good rest." As he said, he winked at the maid beside him. The maid called Yao immediately responded and took Su Li into the manor. After Su Li disappeared from his sight, the smile on the old man's face disappeared instantly, and he left in a hurry. Soon, he came to the elder's yard and saw Su Dingxian unimpeded all the way. He said quickly, "First elder, the new disciple of the head of the branch has a good temperament, but her injury is a little strange. It is not as the head of the branch said that she could recover by consuming some resources. I think she seems to have lost all her cultivation." Su Dingxian leaned on the soft chair calmly, and a glimmer of light flashed in his turbid eyes. "Lost all her cultivation. It will consume a lot of resources to recultivate. Besides, according to Su Dain, this girl must have broken out a strong fighting power to save Su Xianyun and several juniors from the Chaos Zone. Her foundation must have been hurt, which caused her to lose all her cultivation." "Exactly." The old man in black lowered his eyebrows and followed Su Dingxian's words. "The most likely result of recultivating after the foundation is destroyed is that a lot of resources won't improve her cultivation. Su Jiuzhou should thank the gods if she can recover to the level of an ordinary disciple." "Ho ho ho." Su Dingxian squinted and laughed. "The sect doesn't keep idle people. It is the iron rule set by the old ancestor. I was worried that I couldn't find a chance to make Su Dain make mistakes. It is really a case of wearing out iron shoes and fruitless searching, and finding her by chance by chance." He looked up at the old man in black and said in a cold tone, "Go out and get your reward." The black-robed old man's face lit up with joy. He bowed and retreated. Su Dingxian pondered for a moment and summoned a kind-looking elder. After a few hours of secret talk, the kind-looking elder left the courtyard and returned to the mountain where Su Dain was through a secret passage. "Head, the 12th elder is here to see you." Su Dain was sitting at the table and preparing the healing elixir for Su Li. Suddenly, she heard the summon outside the door. She calmly covered the paper on the table with other things and said loudly, "Come in." Not long after, the 12th elder with a kind face came into the room worriedly. After saluting, he whispered, "Head, I think the first elder is too quiet. Something is wrong. Is it about Su Jiuzhou?" "You don't have to worry about Su Jiuzhou. It's not so easy for the old fox, Su Dingxian, to catch my weakness." Su Dain sneered and said in a relaxed tone when she raised her head, "You come at the right time. I asked you to inquire about the spiritual stone mine in the Black Stone Forest. How is it going?" The 12th elder didn't care that he didn't get any information out of Su Yuanhai. He answered obediently, "The people of the other branches have covered up the news. I don't know what the mystery of the low-level spiritual stone mine is. Head, since the people of the 3rd, 4th, and 6th branches are interested in it, why should we do it for Su Yuanhai, the 12th elder?" Su Dain raised her voice and looked at the kind-hearted elder fiercely. A sense of majesty naturally emanated from her. Cultivation is to fight against fate. It's impossible that you don't understand this truth. Just because the 3rd, 4th, and 6th branches are powerful, you have to retreat? Doesn't it mean that you won't fight for a lot of resources as long as someone is fighting for them? The 12th elder's expression changed slightly. He immediately lowered his head with anger in his eyes, but his tone was full of respect and fear as before. "Head, please calm down. I'm confused." Su Dain snorted coldly. "The 2nd branch doesn't keep idle people. Find out the details of the spiritual stone mine in the Black Stone Forest in 3 days. Do you understand?" Yes, head. I'll ask someone to speed up the progress." The 12th elder bowed and left the room. He didn't put away his exaggerated expression until he retreated to the big tactical matrix of the mountain. He spat with a sullen face and went down the mountain. In the study, Su Dain looked at the scene of the 12th elder leaving in the water mirror thoughtfully. "Dain, Since you have long suspected that he is Su Dingxian's man, why did you ask him to investigate the matter in the Black Stone Forest? If he is hiding something from us." A kind-looking woman came in from the side room in a wheelchair and said helplessly, "Sometimes, having such an outstanding daughter was also a kind of trouble." Chapter 446. Mother, why are you here? Seeing the woman, Su Dian's cold and serious expression immediately eased. She squatted down in front of the woman with a smile and said softly, "I can handle the family affairs. Mother, don't worry." "Still hiding it from me?" The woman shook her head and stared at her. "Your Uncle Guang has told me. Is Su Jiuzhou really so important? It's not easy for you to secure the position of the head of the family. If Su Dingxian and others, I promised her, so I will do it," Su Dian said softly with a serious face. "Even if she didn't come to our second branch, she saved Xian Yun and the other two people. I can't ignore her kindness. I am not a cold-blooded old monster of our family." The woman looked more helpless when she heard that. "How dare you say this? You, mother, don't worry. I will handle it well." Su Dian gently squeezed the woman's hand and said softly, "Trust me." The woman's eyes also softened, and there seemed to be tears floating in her eyes. "Of course, I trust you. Even if you make a wrong decision, I will be by your side, Dian." The last sentence sounded in the woman's heart. The study, which was full of intrigue, was filled with a touch of warmth. Su Li came to the hall of the manor and dismissed all the maids who wanted to serve her. She sat on the bed alone and pondered. She had perfectly infiltrated the second branch of the Su family and gained Su Dian's trust. The first step was extremely perfect, but she hadn't figured out how to carry out the second step, especially when the matter of the Black Stone Forest was involved. With my current strength, although I don't know if I can defeat a practitioner of Huashan realm, it is absolutely not a problem for me to survive. Su Li looked inside her pubic region and saw a golden elixir shining with strange light rotating slowly in the 18th grade Black Lotus. When one reached this realm, the elixir was divided into 3 levels, namely, 1 pattern, 2 patterns, and 3 patterns. The more patterns on the surface of the elixir, the higher the potential and the greater the chance of breaking through to Huashan realm in the future. Of course, the 3 levels of combat power were also very different. If a practitioner with 1 pattern of Jindan elixir fought with a practitioner with 3 patterns of Jindan elixir of the same cultivation, he would definitely be defeated. Su Li stared at the golden elixir in her pubic region, and a trace of distress flashed through her eyes. She didn't know whether it was because of the strange phenomenon brought by the body of evil ghost. Her Jindan was outside these 3 levels. The surface of the whole Jindan was covered with black lotuses, which almost dyed the whole Jindan black. If she didn't observe carefully, she couldn't see the layers of black lotuses at all. With such a phenomenon, it was impossible for her to estimate her own strength before she actually fought with a soul formation cultivator. The 18th grade Black Lotus Golden Elixir, Black Lotus Ring, and I even have a lotus mark on my face. Su Li looked away from the pubic region, and her low and serious voice echoed in the small space around her. "It seems that the Ghost Clan really likes the Black Lotus." In the next 2 days, Su Li received practicing resources sent by Su Dian. They were all natural treasures that were excellent for recultivation and had a subtle healing effect on repairing the damaged foundation. Su Li glanced at them and then put them aside. After the completion of the Chuangxing path, it was a matter of course for her to advance from Zhuji realm to Jindan realm. She had directly broken through to the middle stage of Jindan realm by condensing the gift of the star path to the extreme point in Jindan realm. If she wanted to reach the limit in Jindan realm, she needed a lot of resources. Even the resources in Canglei's cave were not enough, not to mention the things sent by Su Dian. "Oh my God, did Su Dian recognize your real body? Why is she so nice to you?" Black Lotus chattered and put away the resources. These things were sent here to be used. Leaving them in the universe ring would leave a trace. Therefore, Su Li had told him before that no matter what Su Dian sent, he should put them all into the Black Lotus ring. Just as Black Lotus put away all the things, there was a sudden sound of messy footsteps outside the hall, mixed with the maid's panicked voice. "Master, Something bad happened. Someone is coming to make trouble. Seeing the maid stumbling from outside the door, Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. She still remembered the maid's name. Yer, what's wrong? Hearing Su Li calling her, Yer suppressed the disgust in her heart and said with a face full of panic, "It's Lady Su He." She suddenly broke into the manner just now. "Master, you should hide quickly. She is about to fight in the hall." Su Li was not moved by the words. She just looked at Yer, which made Yer feel scared. She had thought that Su Li, who had lost all her cultivation, would show a trace of surprise on her face no matter how calm she was. Unexpectedly, this woman had no reaction at all. "I want to escape," Su Li sighed in a low voice. Yer seemed to feel it and looked back. She happened to see a cold-faced woman in red had appeared by the door of the hall. She stared at Su Li with her cold eyes, as if she could freeze Su Li into an ice sculpture with her gaze alone. Yer suddenly realized that she had resigned to her fate. "Who are you?" Su Li asked calmly, but there was a trace of fear that couldn't be hidden in her eyes. Su He noticed it. She curled her lips sarcastically and didn't hide the killing intent in her eyes. Her cold voice echoed in the hall. "Are you Su Jiuzhou?" "It turns out that the one who occupies my brother Songyue's courtyard is a bitch like you, who relies on men to get the position. Su Dian is getting worse and worse. She let a useless person live in the inpatient building. It seems that the head of the second branch should be changed." Su Dian was stunned. She was so arrogant that she let a disabled person live in the inpatient building. Su Li seemed to be angry out of shame and said angrily, "Don't talk nonsense." What?" Su He's almond-shaped eyes slightly glared, and a trace of sharp light shot out. She suppressed the second half of Su Li's words and sneered, "I give you 3 breaths to get out of here. Otherwise, don't blame me for being rude. This is my courtyard." Su Li raised her voice, and her face was full of anger. Su He's face was full of ridicule. "Your courtyard? Su Dian, I give her some face." According to the rules of the second branch of the Su family, all disciples can challenge the head of the courtyard and become the new head of the courtyard. "Now, I challenge you. Do you dare to accept?" "You." Su Li was speechless. She clenched her hands tightly as if she was going to pinch her nails into her flesh. "Oh, I see." Su He revealed a look of sudden realization. She covered her mouth and chuckled. "I forgot that Su Jiuzhou, who is famous in the head branch of the Su family and was personally accepted as a disciple by Su Dian, is now a good-for-nothing who is not even in Lianqi realm. Speaking of this, her eyes were cold. Good-for-nothing. Why don't you get out? Do you really want me to throw you down the mountain before you're satisfied?" Before she finished her words, an angry male voice sounded from outside the door. "I'd like to see how you are going to do it." Hearing this voice, Su He, who was arrogant before, immediately changed her face and grabbed Su Li without saying a word. Su Li's face was gloomy, and she was shocked and angry at the same time. Right at this moment, a figure appeared between the two of them at lightning speed. Bang! Su He was kicked far away like a ball and didn't stop until she hit the wall of the palace. She covered her chest and looked at the big footprint on her chest. Her face was ugly and shocked, and she screamed, "Su Xianyun, you have become stronger again. How is it possible?" "Oh, Su He, you can't estimate the strength of our eldest senior fellow apprentice. He just climbed the crooked tree of Su Songyue. Do you really think that he is invincible and can bully anyone?" Another person leisurely walked out from the door and mocked him. Su Zheng. When Su He saw him, she was like a cat whose tail was stepped on. Her eyes were filled with extreme shame and deep fear. She didn't know what Su Zheng had done to her before. Su Xianyun didn't pay attention to their conversation. He just looked at Su Li, who had become silent since he came in. After a long time, he apologized. "I'm sorry, it's not your fault. It's my choice." Su Li's tone was free and easy with a trace of bitterness, which made Su Xianyun admire her even more. Finally, Su Wanbing also came from the door. He was silent as usual, but Su Li keenly felt that he was a little different. He seemed to be struggling with something. Taking a deep look at Su Wanbing, Su Li turned her eyes to Su He, who had been forced to the corner by Su Zheng. Who is she? Su Xianyun looked at Su He and said in a slightly cold tone, there are all kinds of birds in a big forest. Her name is Su He. She doesn't have a strong background, but I don't know where she learned the skill of bed. Relying on that crooked way, she mingled with many male disciples in the second branch. Now she climbed the fourth elder's favorite lineal descendant and is extremely arrogant. Su Li's eyes slightly narrowed. Which branch does the fourth elder belong to? Su Xianyun showed a trace of embarrassment on his face. He hesitated for a moment and whispered, she belongs to the master's branch. The master didn't know this would happen. It's not suitable for her to show up before the investigation is clear. You don't have to explain so much to me. Su Li smiled. I can understand the master's difficulties, but don't you think there is something wrong with this girl? She can mingle with many male disciples, which proves that she is not stupid. But she came to me at this time. No matter what my final outcome is, her ending has been doomed. Su Xianyun didn't think much before. At this moment, when he heard Su Li's words, he suddenly broke into a cold sweat. Su He, a female disciple with no background, was involved in the conflict between factions. One could imagine her ending. Someone secretly instigated her, but she is not stupid. If the instigator's identity was not high enough, she would not seek death. Why would the master's branch of Su Songyue trouble Su Jiuzhou? Was Su Songyue instigated by the first elder's branch, or? The more Su Xianyun thought about it, the more serious the situation became. He had a lot of people to tell Su Li, but now he had to leave with Su He in a hurry. Before leaving, Su Wanbing, who had been silent, wanted to speak several times, but he swallowed his words. In the end, he didn't say anything and turned to leave. Su Li sat quietly in the hall and looked at the empty gate, lost in thought. Ya who stood aside and witnessed everything, didn't dare to breathe, for fear that her identity would be discovered by Su Li and she would end up like Su He. Go out, I'm tired. With a sigh, Su Li turned and walked to the depths of the palace. Ya immediately breathed a sigh of relief, bowed her head and walked away quickly. When she got out of the palace, she found that her back was wet. I shouldn't have been involved in this mess. Ya-er's face was pale, and she regretted it. But she felt more powerless. Born in such a family, she had no right to stay out of it. Chapter 447. After Ya-er left, the whole hall returned to silence, as if nothing had happened. Su Li closed the stone door of the adytum and restrained all her expressions. She turned over her palm, and the carrier rune fell into her palm. The carrier rune flashed, and Su Yuanhai's voice sounded from it. Master, there is something strange about the spiritual stone mine in the Black Stone Forest. The people of the sixth branch are determined to get it. I was beaten back before I could see clearly what was in it. I don't know if it is an illusion, but I seem to smell a trace of demon energy. Su Li's eyes flashed. Demon? The legend of demons and ghosts could be traced back to the ancient times. Perhaps during the period when Black Lotus was still alive, the demon clan could still be seen frequently. But now, the demon clan in the entire cultivation world could be counted on one's fingers. Only in a few large domains could one still see their active figures. Such a large clan had suddenly disappeared, and no one knew where they had gone. There are demons in Jiuzhou region? Su Li carefully recalled the peeping gaze in the depths of the Black Stone Forest, the coldness with a sense of ridicule in the world of mortals. If it was a demon clan, then the intelligence of this demon clan must not be lower than that of the human clan. As for the realm, the transformation of the demon clan is equivalent to the Huashan realm. Anyway, the mobs of the sixth branch can't deal with it. There is no need to worry. This thought flashed through Su Li's mind, and then she slowly calmed down. Su He had helped her to make a good start, and all she needed to do was to observe. The atmosphere in Su Dian's study was cold and silent. Su He knelt in front of the table with a pale face and lowered head. Her previous arrogance and disregard for Su Dian had completely disappeared. Su Dian squinted her eyes and tapped the table with her knuckles. There was a pressure in the air, and Su He felt as if she was strangled and almost suffocated. Su He, you are a smart person. You probably understand the current situation. If you don't tell the truth, let alone Su Songyue, even the elders behind him can't save you. Suhi's body trembled. She bit her lips and wanted to say something several times, but she thought of something and swallowed the words in her throat. You don't want to say it? Su Dain smiled helplessly. I didn't expect that you have fallen in love with someone after so many years of being fickle. Since that's the case, you attacked this seat's disciple for no reason and almost caused a talented person to lose all possibility of recovery. I will punish you by sending you to the Poison King Valley to sweep for 10 years. Men. Hearing the words, Poison King Valley, Su Dain's expression changed greatly. She screamed in a sharp voice, Poison King Valley? Patriarch, you have no right to send me there. I want to see the Great Elder. You didn't. I don't have power? Su Dain still smiled, but her helplessness turned into sarcasm. Every family has its rules. You wantonly attacked Su Jiuzhou and made a big mistake. Even if Su Dingxian knows about it, it will just waste some time to explain. I still have this power. Come on. Swoosh. Su Xianyun and Su Zheng appeared outside the door. The sunlight shone into the room through the crack of the door, making Su He's face pale. Su Zheng casually walked to Su He's side. He wanted to drag her out, but he found that she was lying on the ground like a pile of mud. It seems that you still want to live. Su Zheng grinned and whispered in Su He's ear, Don't forget your identity. In their eyes, you are just a chess piece that can be thrown away at will. Do you really think that anyone will come to save you? Su He shuddered and finally woke up from the lie. Yes, at this time, she didn't see anyone come to save her, or even say a word for her. Take her away. Su Dain shouted softly. The two words were like a heavy hammer, completely smashing the last defense in Su He's heart. I'll tell you everything. Su He broke down and cried loudly. She clutched the ground tightly. It's the fourth elder. The fourth elder promised that as long as I can drive Su Jiuzhou out of the building, he will let me and senior brother Songyue officially become cultivation partners. Su Dain looked at Su He's crying expressionlessly, but her heart slowly sank. This was the answer she didn't want to hear the most. But what she was afraid of happened. Master, Su Xianyun looked at Su Dain with distress. If he could, he really wanted to share some of the pressure for his master. But their strength was too weak. I'm fine. Su Dain waved her hand, and the gloominess on her face disappeared. She asked, How are the people at the foot of the mountain? The third junior fellow apprentice is stopping them. It seems that the first elder and the others don't want to fall out with each other immediately. They didn't expect that we would suddenly catch Su He for questioning. Thanks to Su Jiuzhou's reminder. Su Dain nodded. Take Su He to the community and keep a close eye on her. Don't let her die. Su Xianyun's heart sank, and then he nodded solemnly. I understand. At the foot of the mountain, Su Wanbing watched the elders under Su Dingxian's command fly away. His expression kept changing, with helplessness and bitterness flashing on his face from time to time. Wanbing. Su Xianyun's voice sounded not far behind him. Su Wanbing's expression immediately became clean. He turned around and nodded. Senior fellow apprentice, they all left. They didn't do anything. Who came? It's the sixth elder and the eighth elder. Su Wanbing answered fluently, but there was an imperceptible pause in his tone when he mentioned the sixth elder. These two people are not powerful in the first elder's faction. It seems that they have given up on Su He. But we still can't be careless. Su Xianyun analyzed in a low voice. He turned to look at Su Wanbing, who was silent as usual. He paused and suddenly said, Wanbing, are you hiding something from me and Zhang? Su Wanbing's heart trembled, and he managed to keep calm. He forced a smile and said, No, don't keep everything in your heart. You have been like this since you were a child. It's really worrisome. Su Xianyun noticed Su Wanbing's abnormality, but he didn't think much about it. He patted Su Wanbing's shoulder and said, We and the master are all your family. What can't you say to your family? If you really can't hold it, just tell us. Don't worry. No matter what it is, Zhang and I are your senior fellow apprentices. Do you understand? I know. Su Wanbing's eyes were slightly red, and he lowered his voice. It seemed that there was a kind of emotion that was suppressed in his throat, and he didn't want to let it out. Su Xianyun thought that he was moved, and suddenly laughed. You are still as sentimental as before. Go back quickly. Don't delay your practice because of these trivial things. Okay. After Su Xianyun left, Su Wanbing stood alone on the stone path at the foot of the mountain, lost in thought. After a long time, he glanced at the direction of Su Dian's study with a complicated look and left silently. Shortly after he left, a light suddenly flashed in the open space where he had been standing, and a petite girl appeared. Su Li took a deep look at the direction where Su Wanbing left. She curled her lips and walked up the mountain. People came and went on the master peak. People passed by Su Li constantly, but no one could see her. Unimpeded, Su Li came to the door of Su Dian's study after half an hour. After waiting for a moment, the 12th elder came in a hurry. The moment he pushed the door open, she followed him in. The layout of Su Dian's study was simple and plain. If it weren't for a few spiritual stone lamps, it would be similar to the study of a secular family of scholars. Su Li liked this style very much. She walked around for a while, and then sat down on the rattan chair beside Su Dian's desk. She looked at the 12th elder with joy and said, "Head, I have news." Su Dian's expression remained unchanged. She knocked on the table with a crisp sound. "Tell me, here's the thing. I took the inner disciples to the Black Stone Forest and hid for several days. Finally, I heard that the 6th branch found demon crystals in the spiritual stone mine in the Black Stone Forest." As soon as the words came out, Su Dian's calm face suddenly changed. She couldn't help but confirm, "Demon crystals? Are you sure?" "It's absolutely true." The 12th elder looked excited. "Although I have never seen a demon, the breath emitted from the crystal is the legendary demon energy. It's exactly the same as what is recorded in the book. There is a fishy smell. The rarer something is, the greater its value." This sentence also applied in the cultivation circle. The demon clan had disappeared for tens of thousands of years, and the demon crystals produced in the human clan were very few and priceless. In the biggest auction held in Jiuzhou region hundreds of years ago, a thumb-sized demon crystal was sold at a frighteningly high price, and thousands of practitioners died because of it. Now, there was a demon crystal mine in Blackstone Forest. When it rains, it pours. Su Dian's face darkened. The first thing that came to her mind was not the preciousness of the demon crystals, but how to minimize the loss of the 2nd branch. As for Su Yuanhai, he might be destroyed in this bloody storm if he was not careful enough. This is beyond the control of our Su family. Are the heads of the 6th branch crazy? How dare they try to monopolize it? Su Dian's eyes showed anger. "I will go to the main branch immediately. This matter should be decided by the old ancestor himself." The 12th elder seemed to have expected Su Dian's reaction. He nodded and was about to leave, but Su Dian stopped him at this time. "Wait." The 12th elder turned his head in confusion and saw Su Dian's intelligent eyes flashing. Su Dian said with a smile, "During this period, you and the 4th elder will be responsible for Su Jiuzhou's safety. If she loses even a hair, I will hold you responsible. The 4th elder and I will protect Su Jiuzhou?" The 12th elder was shocked. What did Su Dian mean? Had he and the 4th elder been discovered? If they really did something to Su Jiuzhou, could Su Dian deal with them openly? Was Su Dian going to give up Su Jiuzhou? The 12th elder thought of many things in an instant, but he didn't show it on his face. He nodded and said respectfully, "As you wish, head of the branch." "That's great. I'll be back soon." A moment after Su Dian left the study, a flash of light flew away from the mountain peak. At the same time, in the courtyard of Su Dian's mother, a middle-aged man dressed meticulously and with an ordinary face wearing a handyman uniform heard some words. "Uncle Guang, it's all up to you." The middle-aged man stopped the broom in his hand and looked at the woman who was sunbathing at the door of the room. The woman sensed his gaze and sighed. "Do you want to protect her at the cost of exposure? What's so good about Su Jiuzhou?" Chapter 448. The woman shook her head and sighed. The plain-looking middle-aged man didn't answer. He suddenly stopped sweeping and turned his head to look outside. His gentle eyes flashed with sharpness. What's wrong? The woman glanced at the gate of the courtyard in confusion, but she didn't see anyone. She couldn't help but ask. The middle-aged man also had a trace of doubt in his eyes. After confirming for a while, he shook his head. I was wrong. It's nothing. At this moment, Suli stood on the stone platform hundreds of meters away from the courtyard, looking at the warm and peaceful courtyard from afar. Her eyes were deep. Since that person can find my trace, his cultivation must not be lower than Huashan realm. Su Dian was supported by a practitioner of Huashan realm? Suli pondered. The relationship between that person and Su Dian's mother was obviously not that simple. No wonder Su Dian could practice so fast with a practitioner of Huashan realm supporting her from behind. I wonder who will win if I fight with him? Suli thought. Although she only comprehended a trace of the destruction sword intent, and the realm of sword intent had just reached a higher level, she speculated that it should not be difficult to deal with a practitioner of Huashan realm who had just comprehended the power of the willpower. However, she didn't feel that the middle-aged man was a beginner of Huashan realm. After taking a deep look at the courtyard, Suli turned around and jumped off the stone platform and disappeared. At the same time, the middle-aged man sensed that the looming spy also fell silent. He didn't show any change on his face and continued to sweep, but many thoughts flashed through his mind. They have caught up. I can't stay here any longer. He glanced at Su Dian's mother vaguely and sighed in his heart. He didn't say anything in the end. After Suli left Su Dian's mountain peak, she quietly returned to the courtyard. Suhi was just taken away, which deterred many impulsive disciples who were jealous of the courtyard. During this time, except for Su Xianyun and others who visited the courtyard, there was no one else. It was really deserted. Suli was happy. The more pressure Su Dian was under, the busier Su Xianyun and others would be, which made it more convenient for her to act. The 4th elder and the 12th elder dare not take action in a short time. Although Su Dian's delaying tactic is exquisite, Su Dingxian is old and smart. He will probably come up with a way to break the situation soon. Suli sorted out what she had learned today and thought to herself, the key to breaking the game is nothing more than uncertainty about my body. In that case, a smile gradually appeared on Suli's face. Let me give it a push. Outside the hall, Yi stood obediently at the door with her head down, waiting for Suli's instructions that might come at any time. After Suhi was taken away, her thoughts faded. She just wanted to serve Su Jiuzhou obediently until this matter was over. However, it was clear that some people's minds couldn't withstand the test. What was that sound? Ya suddenly heard a noise, as if a mouse was grinding its teeth. Again? Ya listened carefully and finally heard that the sound came from the main hall. But how could there be a mouse in the main hall that was full of formations? Is Su Jiuzhou doing something? This thought appeared in her mind, and her heart was filled with curiosity. She glanced at the others, and seeing that no one was paying attention to her, she thought about it again and finally couldn't help but sneak into the main hall. The sound of friction came into her ears from time to time, as if it was leading the way. Ya didn't doubt it and followed the sound to the back hall. At a glance, she saw that the stone door of the addendum used for practicing in the back hall was unlocked, and a touch of red light leaked out from it. She was slightly alert, walked to the door lightly, and peeped inside. The pungent smell of blood came to her face, and Yub-Er's heart trembled. But she saw a shocking scene. The whole stone wall was covered with blood beads, as if a large amount of blood had been sprayed on it and slowly slid down from a high place, dyeing the whole wall blood red. Her pupils trembled, and she looked down. Suddenly, she saw more blood, which gathered into a small pool in the middle of the uneven stone room. Why is there so much blood? Whose blood is it? Ya resisted the urge to escape from here immediately and continued to stare. Finally, she saw a petite figure squatting in the blood mist and wiping the wall. She was clearly a delicate and pure face, but in such a bloody atmosphere, she looked extraordinarily terrifying in Ya-Er's eyes. That's Su Jiuzhou? Ya-Er clenched her hands, and her thoughts changed rapidly. She killed someone and is destroying the corpse? But why don't I see the corpse? No. Didn't she lose all her cultivation? How could she kill someone? Ya-er didn't wonder for too long, because she saw Suli, who was wiping the wall, suddenly trembled and covered her mouth. A large amount of red blood flowed down from the gap of her palm like a small waterfall and gathered along the lines on the ground into the blood pool. These are all Su Jiuzhou's blood? Ya-er's pupils suddenly shrank, and countless thoughts flashed through her mind. Finally, her heart was occupied by a speculation. I heard that Su Jiuzhou was seriously injured and lost all her cultivation. The head of the family is trying his best to support her to recultivate. But judging from the scene in front of me, Su Jiuzhou's body is obviously ruined, and it is impossible for her to recultivate. The result of her recultivating is that she keeps vomiting blood, and uses the blood as a medium to dissipate all the cultivation that she has recultivated. Ya-er's body tightened, and she was really shocked by her own thoughts. If the truth was as she thought, she would definitely get a great reward if she told the first elder about it. But if she guessed wrong, the result would be Ya-er's face was a little gloomy. Her life was at stake in a wrong decision. Was it worth it? As if there was a response, Ya-er saw Suli stop coughing up blood in the addendum. She took away her palm and revealed an extremely pale face. She looked at the bright red palm in a daze and sighed softly, "Master, I'm sorry to let you down." Hearing this, Ya-er seemed to be given a reassuring pill, and she tiptoed away with joy. Her guess must be right. I'm going to report it to the first elder. We can't let anyone get ahead of us. An indescribable urgency filled Ya-er's heart. Her eyes were full of the bright future of cultivation, and the words she had warned herself before had long been forgotten. Shortly after she left, Suli's pale face gradually recovered. She reached out and waved her hand, gathering all the blood into a huge blood ball. After removing the impurities, they turned into bloodlines and returned to Suli's body through her pores. Blood, of course, was real. This little blood couldn't hurt her at all, but her blood poison was really weird. So far, she had only figured out some simple uses. If she let it spread, she didn't know what would happen. It was safer to take it back. It's done. Black Lotus Ring sprang out and laughed. As long as Su Dingxian dares to take action, the second branch of the Su family will be in your pocket. Don't be careless. Su Li's eyes were indifferent. Su Dian has a practitioner in Huashan realm behind her, but she lets Su Dingxian develop freely. Su Dingxian may not be simple. Black Lotus rolled his eyes. This little girl would smile at Hua Yin, Yin Zai and others occasionally, and even Mei Ruhan saw her smile. Only to Black Lotus, she was sarcastic every time and didn't give him a good look. Who did I offend? Why did I find such a host? Black Lotus became angrier and angrier as he thought about it. Finally, he directly shrank into Black Lotus Ring and didn't come out. Suli didn't bother to pay attention to him and swaggered out of the courtyard. In a short time, she was completely out of the sphere of influence of the second branch of the Su family and flew to the territory of the seventh branch of the Su family. Shortly after Suli left, Su Dingxian came to the courtyard with a large group of people, which immediately alerted Su Xianyun and others. Just when Su Xianyun was anxious for the elders of Su Dian's branch to arrive, everyone gathered in front of the addendum. The two sides confronted each other, and the atmosphere was unprecedentedly tense. Su Xianyun's face was extremely gloomy. Su Dingxian came with his people shortly after the master left. They must have colluded. He saw the expressionless fourth elder and the 12th elder mixed in the team and didn't intend to come over at all. His heart slowly sank. The master's situation was even worse. Su Dingxian entered the addendum. Although the trace of blood was extremely faint, he still caught it. First elder, the addendum was not like this before. It was full of blood. It was all Su Jiuzhou's blood. Ya-er panicked when she saw the clean addendum. Su Dingxian showed a gentle smile and waved his hand to Ya-er. Don't panic. If you don't want others to know, don't do it. No matter how clean Su Jiuzhou cleaned the addendum, some things were still left. Ya-er was flattered by the first elder's comforting words and stood aside with a red face. Su Xianyun and Su Zheng looked more and more embarrassed. Su Jiuzhou vomited blood? Why didn't they know? Did Su Jiuzhou hide it from them? Where did Su Jiuzhou go? Su Xianyun looked around. The whole hall was quiet, and it didn't seem that someone was hiding in it. Su Dingxian walked to the wall unhurriedly and touched the slightly rough wall with his palm. The traces of being wiped were reflected in his mind, and his smile became more obvious. Su Jiuzhou is obviously terminally ill and will die soon, but the head of the family is obsessed with her and allocates a lot of precious practicing resources to her. How do you explain this trip? Speaking of this, Su Dingxian suddenly turned around, and his sharp eyes fell on Su Xianyun like a knife. Su Xianyun, you are the first disciple of the head of the family and the young head of the second branch of the Su family. Do you know anything about this? Su Xianyun's body shook slightly, but he resisted the pressure and retorted loudly, "Nonsense. Master has devoted himself to the second branch and cultivated many outstanding disciples for the second branch over the years. How could he bend the law for personal gain? I think a thief deliberately forged this addendum in order to frame Master." Su Dingxian didn't expect that Su Xianyun dared to refute, and his old face became cold. Su Jiuzhou absconded to avoid punishment, and you still want to quibble? Ha 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 ha. Su Zheng laughed and pointed at Su Dingxian without any fear and scolded. Su Jiuzhou escaped? I think you, old man, have caught her and want no evidence. Su Dingxian, don't forget that you are the first elder of the second branch, and Su Jiuzhou is the fourth disciple of the second branch. She is the future pillar of the second branch. You are so selfish to eradicate dissidents. Aren't you afraid of being blamed by the old ancestor? As soon as these words came out, the expressions of Su Xianyun and other elders changed. Su Zheng, the hothead, had a bad temper. He didn't know that his words had severely offended Su Dingxian. If it weren't for so many people who saw this scene, he really wanted to twist off the head of this arrogant boy and kick it like a ball. Bastard, you don't respect your elders. Is this what your master taught you? The fourth elder stood out and scolded. He was originally blamed by Su Dingxian because of Su He. At this moment, he immediately stood out to redeem himself when he saw the opportunity. Su Xianyun pulled the corner of Su Zheng's clothes, but Su Zheng didn't seem to feel it at all. He turned his head and scolded sarcastically, "No matter how much of a bastard I am much more educated than some fence-sitters who like to climb the wall. Don't you think so, fourth elder?" As soon as these words came out, the fourth elder's face immediately turned livid. He was so angry that his lips turned purple, and he couldn't say a word. Chapter 449. Enough. It's improper to make such a racket. Just as the crowd was quarreling in the hall, an angry snort passed through the hall and went straight into everyone's ears, like the morning bell and evening drum, which shocked everyone for a while. At the same time, a stooped figure appeared in front of the bedchamber. Before everyone could blink, the figure came to Su Dingxian and glanced at the whole hall indifferently. Why is he here? Seeing the old man's face, Su Xianyun's heart skipped a beat, and he felt something was wrong. He braced himself to bow respectfully and shouted in unison with other elders, "Old ancestor! Old ancestor! Old ancestor!" The stooped elder nodded. His face full of age spots was very indifferent. Only when he looked at Su Dingxian did he show a little gentleness. This person was Su Dingxian's biggest backer, and also the foundation of Su Dingxian's branch in the second branch. Su Dingchuan, I've heard the ins and outs of the matter. Let's talk about it first. I didn't find Su Jiuzhou's pneuma under the scan of my divine awareness. If I'm not mistaken, Su Jiuzhou has escaped from the second branch with those practicing resources. Su Dingchuan didn't listen to Su Xianyun and others' explanation at all. He made a conclusion as soon as he appeared and ordered everyone, "How can the practicing resources of our Su family be cheated? Immediately send people to hunt down Su Jiuzhou, dead or alive." Old ancestor, I'm afraid there must be a misunderstanding. Su Xianyun was anxious and couldn't help but say. Su Dingchuan looked at him, and he suddenly held his breath, as if something was pressing on his head, making him unable to speak. I believe that the head of the family is absolutely loyal to our Su family. It's just that the demoness is cunning and cheated her. I won't pursue this matter, and I will put in a good word for her in front of the old ancestor. You don't have to worry. Old ancestor, Su Jiuzhou can't cheat us. She saved my life. If it weren't for her, the three of us would have been dead. Su Dingchuan turned black into white as if it were true. Su Xianyun trembled with anger and defended Su Li loudly, regardless of the pressure on his head. That's right. If Su Jiuzhou is really a liar, why did she ruin her future for such a little bit of resources? First Elder, your words don't make sense at all. As Su Zheng spoke, he nudged the silent Su Wanbing beside him. Third junior brother, say something? Su Wanbing turned his head, which startled Su Xianyun and Su Xianyun, because his face was terrible. Seeing this, Su Dingxian smiled meaningfully and said, Junior Xianyun, you also said that except for the three of you, no one else knows what happened in the demon area. Who knows if Su Jiuzhou lost all her cultivation because of saving you? As he spoke, he stared at Su Wanbing. The meaning in his eyes was self-evident. Su Xianyun was about to refute, but he saw Su Wanbing, who had been silent all the time, suddenly stood up and said softly in a strange tone that he had never heard before, First Elder is right. Su Jiuzhou's injury in the Chaos Zone has nothing to do with us. It was her own injury. Since coming back, Su Jiuzhou has discussed with us how to seize the cultivation resources of the Su family. Although I agreed on the surface, I felt tormented in my heart. Now I can't bear to see the elders continue to be deceived. So, I hereby explain. As soon as this was said, the whole hall fell into a dead silence. Su Xianyun looked at Su Wanbing's face and opened his mouth again and again, but he didn't say a complete sentence. He didn't know how to ask. At this moment, the familiar junior fellow apprentice left him with only coldness and unfamiliarity. Su Wanbing, are you crazy? What are you talking about? Seeing Su Wanbing lying with his eyes open, Su Zheng was really going crazy. He grabbed Su Wanbing's collar and said, Do you know what will happen if you do this? Are you worthy of the master? Are you worthy of Su Jiuzhou who saved your life? Su Wanbing showed a smile that was uglier than crying and said mechanically, Second senior fellow apprentice, why do you do this? I can't bear to see you make more mistakes. Get lost. Su Zheng shook off Su Wanbing and clapped his hands hard. He held back his anger and disappointment and said in a trembling tone, I will dirty my hands if I beat you. You are not the third junior fellow apprentice. Su Dingxian calmly watched Su Xianyun and the other two brothers turn against each other. He coughed twice and whispered to Su Dingchuan, Old ancestor. Su Dingchuan glanced at him. Su Dingxian didn't see clearly whether the look contained a warning or something else. Then he heard Su Dingxian said loudly, Since Su Xianyun and Su Zheng are accomplices, they can't be tolerated. Guards, take them to the Poison King Valley and let them be punished for 10 years. Su Xianyun and Su Zheng were stunned and doubted that they had heard it wrong. Even if all the crimes were true, it was not enough for them to be sent to the Poison King Valley. But now, before everything was investigated clearly, Su Dingchuan forced them to be convicted and sent them to the Poison King Valley. Su Dingxian wants to destroy the master's lineage. Danger. Su Xianyun reacted with horror in his eyes. He grabbed Su Zheng and retreated without saying a word. Although he understood that he couldn't clear his name if he retreated, it was better than dying here for no reason. Do you want to escape from punishment like Su Jiuzhou? Stay here. Su Dingchuan's cold voice came out, and he sent out a palm print. The moment the palm print left the palm print, it became dozens of times bigger in the blink of an eye, and covered the heads of Su Xianyun and Su Zheng with the weight of Mount Tai. Su Wanbing's face changed dramatically. It's different from what we agreed. Don't kill them. Before he finished his words, he was knocked out by Su Dingxian and fell to the ground. Su Xianyun sensed the intense chill and immediately smelled the smell of death. But he couldn't avoid it because of the huge gap in strength. At this critical moment, a silver light fell from the sky, penetrated the wall from the outer hall, and collided with the huge palm print. Boom! Amidst the deafening roar, two brilliant rays of light, one gold and one silver, flashed in the palace, and then the entire hall fell apart, directly split in half from the middle. The many servants outside the hall stared blankly at this scene, and then they all shuddered and fled in panic. The hall collapsed. Run! Soon after the servants fled, figures flew out of the ruins of the palace, and all of them were covered with dust. Some of them, who were too close to the center of the collision, were pale and flew out shakily with their hands on their chests. Obviously, they were seriously injured. Su Dingxian, who had the strength of Yuanying realm, was not injured. But when he saw Ye, who had died in the ruins, he couldn't help but look terrible. She was the only witness who saw Su Li vomit blood, but she was shocked to death by the aftermath of the fight. Old ancestor, he called Su Dingchuan, but the latter didn't respond. He just stared at the figures slowly appearing in the smoke below with a solemn face. After a while, the smoke and dust dissipated. Su Dingchuan squinted and saw a middle-aged man in a servant's linen clothes standing upright in the ruins, protecting Su Xianyun and Su Zheng, who had just recovered from the shock but were unharmed. "Uncle Guang," Su Xianyun said in astonishment, "how could you?" In his eyes, Uncle Guang had always been a servant who took care of his master's mother. He was a man of few words, but he was extremely careful and took good care of his master's mother. But such a servant, who had no sense of existence in daily life, turned out to be an old ancestor of Yuanying realm who could rival Su Dingchuan. Su Xianyun couldn't figure it out, while Su Zheng was stunned and didn't come to his senses for a long time. The middle-aged man shook his head and didn't respond to Su Xianyun. He stared at Su Dingxian in the nothingness not far away with a pair of indifferent eyes, and said slowly, "You have crossed the line." Su Dingchuan couldn't help but sneer. "I have guessed that a practitioner of Huashan realm is probably standing behind Su Dain, but I didn't expect it to be you. Fellow practitioner, may I know your name?" "I'm just a nobody. Don't bother the old ancestor of Su family," the middle-aged man said faintly, and his tone was as indifferent as before. "Before this matter is investigated clearly, don't touch anyone from Su Dain's branch, including Su Wanbing. Are you ordering me?" Su Dingchuan's wrinkled old face showed coldness. "This is not a place where an outsider like you can give orders." "Su Dingchuan," the middle-aged man calmly called his name, and there seemed to be a smile on his indifferent face. "You can choose not to listen to me. But with my strength, even if I am not your opponent, it is still easy for me to kill all the people below Huashan realm and Su Dingxian's branch before you react. Do you want to have a try?" As soon as the words came out, many elders' faces changed slightly, and they subconsciously stayed away from the middle-aged man. Even Su Dingxian felt a chill in his heart and couldn't help but get closer to Su Dingchuan. This was a tough guy. Su Dingchuan's face darkened, and he looked at the middle-aged man coldly. The golden energy in his palm kept changing, and he seemed to be about to take action. Su Dingxian was anxious at once, and he hurriedly transmitted the sound in a low voice, "Old ancestor, think twice. If almost all the people in the second branch are dead, what's the use of us seizing an empty shell?" "Shut up." Su Dingchuan transmitted a curse and stared at the middle-aged man like a poisonous snake staring at its prey. After a long time, the energy in Su Dingchuan's hand dissipated, and the atmosphere eased. Su Dain did a bad job, and the evidence is conclusive. Halfway through, he glanced at Ye, who died in the ruins, and his face trembled. He continued to say to the middle-aged man, "I will ask the old ancestor of the main family to come and make a decision about Su Jiuzhou. Before the matter is over, Su Xianyun and Su Dain will be under your watch. If they leave the Su family, don't blame me for asking the main family to kill them all. I will take him away too." The middle-aged man pointed at Su Wanbing, who was seriously injured and unconscious under the ruins, and his eyes were deep. "Everything will be decided after Su Dain comes back. If you can convince Su Dain wholeheartedly, I will not meddle in other people's business." Su Dingchuan frowned and didn't speak. Su Dingxian stood out and sneered, "That's good. I'd like to see how Su Dain will quibble for herself in such a situation." As he spoke, his expression couldn't help but turn ugly. This was because the middle-aged man didn't even look at him. He just waved his hand and moved the collapsed wall of the hall. After rescuing Su Wanbing, he left without another word. Chapter 450. On this day, in Iyun Yard, Su Yuanhai's face was pale, but his expression was extremely respectful. He stood in front of the table in the room and said with a hint of surprise, "Master, why are you here? You should have told me so that I could ask people to prepare tea and snacks." Su Li didn't answer. She just turned over the information on the table and gradually frowned. Seeing this, Su Yuanhai immediately added, "Many of our people are in the spiritual stone mine, and the people of the sixth branch are also there. It's inevitable that there will be conflicts. What happened to your injury?" Su Li raised her head and her eyes were burning. Su Yuanhai covered his chest and answered quickly, "I dare not hide it from you." In addition to Su Jinan, there was another senior from the sixth branch. His cultivation was not lower than the late stage of Yuanying realm. "I was seriously injured by him because of carelessness." Su Yuanhai peeped at Su Li and couldn't help but feel relieved when he saw that she was expressionless. "Let's go." At this time, Su Li suddenly said. She stood up and came to Su Yuanhai in a flash. She said lightly, "Go to the Black Stone Forest." "Now?" Su Yuanhai was shocked. "Master, your identity." Before he finished his words, he saw that Su Li's face and height had changed. She turned into a skinny woman with a completely strange appearance and pneuma in the blink of an eye. Su Yuanhai was shocked. There is such a secret method in the cultivation circle. Even your pneuma has changed. He didn't say anything more and immediately took Su Li to the Blackstone Forest. When the two left Iyun Yard and got on the spiritual boat, they became 3 people. While controlling the spiritual boat, Su Yuanhai secretly looked at the young man who was suddenly made up by Su Li. The more he sensed, the weirder he felt. This man looked familiar, and he must have seen him somewhere. But his bone age was like that of a baby, definitely no more than 1 year. Mr. Subordinates are indeed unique in their own ways. Compared to them, I seem too ordinary. Su Yuanhai remembered that he had seen Yin Zai and others before. He sighed in his heart and drove the spiritual boat obediently. Dongfang Wuxue, who had just been released from Tsang Lei's cave by Su Li in the spiritual boat, showed a silly smile at this moment. He was an old monster whose mental age was not much younger than Su Li's. He breathed the air of Qingshui Circle desperately. After walking a few steps with uncoordinated hands and feet, he quickly adapted to the new body. In addition to joy, there was also deep gratitude in his eyes. If it weren't for Su Li, he didn't know how long it would take for him to rebuild his physical body in this life. And if Su Li hadn't destroyed the evil spirit in Tsang Lei's cave, he probably wouldn't even have the chance to see the light of day again. Hurry up and familiarize yourself with the place. This time, I'll need you to lead the way to the Black Stone Forest. Su Li transmitted the sound. Dongfang Wushue's smile froze, and his eyes widened slightly. Going to that damn place again? Madam, no one has been able to unravel the secret of the Black Stone Forest. It's too risky for you to go there rashly. In horror, Dongfang Wuxue subconsciously dissuaded him. Su Li's eyes became sharp. What did you call me? Dongfang Wuxue immediately realized that he said something wrong in a hurry. He quickly remedied, Master, please don't blame me. My soul and physical body are still merging, and the memory in the reincarnation mirror often pops up in my mind. So, Su Li stood on the edge of the spiritual boat, letting the fierce wind blow over her thin body. Dongfang Wuxue almost didn't hear her plain words in the wind, but he still understood. What's Ling Li's status in Qingshui Circle? At this moment, countless pictures flashed through Dongfang Wushue's mind, including all kinds of terrible rumors and the faint laughter of passers-by. I'm not very clear. Dongfang Wuxue suppressed those pictures and said with a bitter smile. Su Li looked at him meaningfully, but didn't expose him. She continued to ask, in this case, tell me the news of the Black Stone Forest. You wandered in the Black Stone Forest for a long time. You must have gained something, right? Of course. Dongfang Wuxue breathed a sigh of relief. He organized his words and said tirelessly. Speaking of which, I learned the legend of the Black Stone Forest from Tian Sanrit. He said that according to the ancient records, the Black Stone Forest was struck by a thunderbolt and turned black. After that, the vitality didn't disappear. Flowers and trees could still grow, but they all turned black. Even the stones couldn't escape. The thunderbolt was extraordinary, so he speculated that there was a cave of inheritance in the black stone forest. As a result, he found the cave, but he couldn't walk out of it alive. Dongfang Wushue's expression was slightly complicated, but Su Li was expressionless. She pointed her fingertips and raised her eyebrows. That's all? Of course. Dongfang Wushue noticed her dissatisfaction and quickly replied, there are many rumors about the Blackstone Forest. I can't tell them all in 3 days. Is there anything you want to hear? It seems that you do know a lot. Su Li looked at the darkness on the horizon. Then tell me about the rumors related to demons. Demons? Dongfang Wushue felt strange. Although he didn't know why Su Li was interested in a race that had disappeared for a long time, he still sorted out what he had learned and said with a frown, there are not many rumors about demons in the Blackstone Forest, and none of them seems to be true. Some people say that the entire Blackstone Forest is a huge sleeping black stone monster, and those black trees are the monster's hair. Some people say that there is a demon dragon hiding in the Blackstone Forest that can spit out lightning, and that the lightning was struck by it back then. Some people say that there is a cold pond in the depths of the Blackstone Forest, so deep that the bottom cannot be seen, and at the bottom of the pond hides an extremely terrifying old monster. Dongfang Wushue said a lot. Su Yuanhai was interested in it at first, but he became numb later. There were so many demons, and any one of them could have an accompanying demon crystal. How could he confirm it? But Su Li listened with great interest and let Dongfang Wushue continue to talk. Time passed slowly, and the spiritual boat soon arrived at the camp of the 7th branch outside the Blackstone Forest. During this time, Dongfang Wushue had perfectly integrated with his new physical body. Although there was no cultivation in his body, his realm was still there. It was only a matter of time before he recultivated to Yuanying realm. The head is here. Su Yuanhai's arrival naturally caused a sensation. Except for those who were seriously injured and bedridden, the rest of the practitioners all came out to greet him. Of course, they saw Su Li and Dongfang Wushue. Su Yuanhai laughed and introduced them according to Su Li's order. This is the Grand Elder of an I sect. Her cultivation is also in the late stage of Yuanying realm. With her help, we can definitely take back the spiritual stone mine. As soon as he said this, the practitioners who were still confused were shocked and saluted again and again. At the same time, their uneasy hearts were filled with unprecedented hope. A practitioner in the late stage of Yuanying realm was even higher than the head. That's great. I don't like the 6th branch for a long time. It's just that the old guy Su Jinan asked for help. Now, we have one too. An I sect is a small sect that the head strongly protects. I was wondering why the head favored an I sect so much. Now I finally understand. The head is really far-sighted. We are not as good as him. For a moment, the depressed atmosphere of the whole camp was swept away. They were full of fighting spirit and wished that Su Yuanhai could take people to the spiritual stone mine immediately. Su Yuanhai was still calm. He knew that since Su Li arrived here, everything was no longer up to him. He came to the main camp first and summoned the scout practitioner to learn about the recent situation. Head, the 6th branch has gone too far. The scout practitioner was a clever young practitioner with a very ordinary appearance. As soon as he came in, he said indignantly, Su Jinan not only sent people to continue to invade our territory, but also guarded the entrance of each mine. As long as our miners came out, they immediately robbed them. In the past half a month, we have fought with the 6th branch countless times. Many miners have died. The friction is getting worse. Su Yuanhai's face turned livid. It has only been half a month, and the situation has deteriorated so much. Our people are either dead or injured. The 6th branch is not any better. Is Su Jinan crazy? Head, in my opinion, the 6th branch is very anxious. It seems that something terrible is going to happen, and they want to make a quick retreat. That's why they are mining the weird stone regardless of the loss. The young practitioner analyzed seriously. Su Yuanhai was stunned and asked, why didn't I see what you said in the intelligence? The young practitioner obviously hesitated for a moment, and then said as if he was ready to risk everything, Head, These are all my guesses. The scout chief said that I was talking nonsense and would mislead you, so he didn't let me write it in the report. Really? What the scout chief said is not unreasonable, Su Yuanhai was muttering to himself. Su Li, who had been silent, suddenly said, "Then tell me, what's the basis of your guesses? You can't be a good scout just by feeling." The young practitioner was stunned and looked at Su Yuanhai. Su Yuanhai nodded immediately. Then he felt it was inappropriate, so he added, "If you see this person in the future, you should be more respectful than when you see me. Do you understand?" The young practitioner was horrified and vaguely understood that he knew a big secret. He didn't dare to think more and immediately lowered his head, saying, "My lord, I had sneaked into the mine where the sixth branch was mining and found that there were many small pieces of, or that had not been dug out. The mining method was extremely rough and wasteful. I think if you see it with your own eyes, you will definitely come to the same conclusion. The sixth branch wants to make a fortune and leave the mess to us." Speaking of this, the young practitioner raised his head and saw the girl smile. At this moment, he felt that the light in the room was brightened. "What's your name?" Being asked his name, the young practitioner was stunned and said subconsciously, "My name is Su Mian." Su Li nodded. "You are a good seedling. Unfortunately, your cultivation is too low." As she said, she threw a universe bag to him. "Practice hard?" Su Mian was completely stunned and looked at Su Yuanhai at a loss. But Su Yuanhai said with a smile, "Quickly thank me." Su Mian sensitively saw a trace of envy in Su Yuanhai's eyes. He was shocked and didn't dare to think more. He quickly knelt down and kowtowed. Chapter 451. Su Li never thought that she could reach the end by herself. She needed a lot of talents. Except for annexing other sects, she would not let anyone go as long as she met the right one. Su Mian was born with a keen intuition, so she thought highly of him. As for whether this person could reach the standard she wanted in the future, only time would tell. A moment later, Su Li and Su Mian came out of the main tent, while Su Yuanhai stayed in the camp to preside over the overall situation. "Go to the mine occupied by the sixth branch." Su Li gave a faint order, and Su Mian immediately led the way in front of her without asking any questions. After they left the camp, they passed through the dark jungle. About an hour later, they came to the back of a low mountain. Although the black mist blocked her sight, Su Li could still see the miners coming and going in the bumpy mine in the call at a glance. The clanking sound of cutting oars lingered in her ears. It was a scene of bustling activity. "Over this hill, we will reach the mine of the sixth branch." Su Mian transmitted the sound with a hint of nervousness. "Almost all the people of the sixth branch are around the mine. It is heavily guarded. Lady, I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to sneak in." Su Li's eyes flashed, and she transmitted the sound back. "You have been exploring here for a long time. Have you ever met a practitioner in Huashan Realm?" "Huashan Realm?" Su Mian's eyes widened, and he shook his head rather strangely. "I have only seen one in the late stage of Yuanying Realm since I started my cultivation. I have never seen a mighty practitioner in Huashan Realm." Su Mian suddenly realized that the person in front of him was a living practitioner in the late stage of Yuanying Realm. He was lucky enough to be valued by a senior in the late stage of Yuanying Realm? He pinched his face, and still felt it was unreal. Su Li stared at the mining carts coming and going in the mine, and the ores were shining with a strange light in the fire. Her psychic awareness quietly swept through the whole mine like a spring breeze and penetrated into the depths of the spiritual mine. But this time, her psychic awareness, which had always been successful, was blocked by the soil, and she could not see the reality in the mine. "Does the demon crystal block my psychic awareness?" Su Li narrowed her eyes slightly. She picked up Su Mian, who was still in a daze, and directly flew down. Su Mian widened his eyes and watched himself being thrown into the bright mine by Su Li. He was so scared that his scalp was numb. His heart was about to fall out of his throat. Fortunately, his nerves were still quite thick, and he didn't scream out of fear. When his feet landed on the ground, Su Mian looked around stiffly, only to find that the cultivators and miners around him were still working and patrolling as usual. as if they had not seen him at all. Senior, this? Su Mian stared at this scene blankly and subconsciously looked at Su Li, but she didn't mean to explain at all. She just pointed at the mine and transmitted the sound. You have been here before. Lead the way. Su Mian nodded and tentatively walked a few steps into the mine shaft. After finding that no one could see him, his expression changed from nervousness to excitement, and he strode into the mine shaft. His eyes flashed. He, who had cultivated for more than 200 years, thought that he had seen many strange things, but he did not expect that there was such a mysterious secret technique in the world that allowed him to break into the enemy's camp as if there was no one there. In the future, when I am successful in my cultivation, I can do the same. Su Mian's mind was in a mess as he looked for the right entrance. Su Li followed him, and a touch of appreciation flashed through her eyes. This junior was bold enough and had a good temperament. As long as his talent was not bad, he could be trained well. At this moment, her thoughts were different. It was a waste for such a talent to be only a scout. The spiritual stone mine had not been mined for a long time, but the mine was already accessible in all directions. There were 6 or 7 entrances from the mine. Su Mian carefully identified and found the entrance that he had sneaked into last time. Senior, the strange ore is not found in all the mines. When I came in before, only this one produced the strange, or among the 3 entrances. Now there are 7 mines. It seems that the people of the 6th branch have found a new mining site. Su Mian analyzed as he led the way. Su Li nodded gently and said nothing. After a while, the breath of the mine suddenly changed, and a faint demonic energy lingered in her nose. Su Li stopped and looked around. It was dark and silent. This place has been mined out, and no one stays here. Su Mian added carefully. Then he saw Su Li walk to the stone wall and dig out a thumb-sized weird stone. It's a demon crystal. Black lotus ring appeared on its own and sensed the demonic energy in Su Li's hand. His surprised voice came into Su Li's ears. This demonic energy is so pure. Pure? Su Li glanced at Black Lotus Ring, who didn't lose his temper this time. He explained carefully, yes, the status of the demon clan is determined by bloodline. The purer the bloodline, the nobler the status. I think the person who left the breath on the demon crystal was at least a member of the royal family in the ancient demon clan. There was really a demon in the black stone forest. Su Li's eyes were slightly cold. She remembered the gaze after exploring the Tsanglei's cave. She transmitted the sound softly. Do you think that the demon is still hiding in the depths of the black stone forest? This Black Lotus looked at the depths of the dark mine with a dry mouth and tongue. Hearing Su Li's speculation, he suddenly felt numb. Who knows? If there is such a mighty demon in the world, we'd better run away. The people in the entire Juzhou region are not enough for it. Su Li glanced at him and walked to the depths of the mine silently. Su Mian didn't know why Su Li suddenly left after being in a daze for a while. He could only follow her quickly. Black Lotus sullenly hid in Black Lotus Ring and recalled Su Li's gaze just now. This king is actually being looked down upon? You little girl who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. When you see that mighty demon, you will regret it. However, if I really meet it, I will also be swallowed by the mighty demon. No. When Black Lotus was in a dilemma, Su Li had already walked to the end of the mine. There were 3 forks in front of her. The tunnel was no longer as dark as before. Instead, there was a lamp every dozens of steps. The lights were bright. It was not like this before. Su Mian exclaimed secretly. Su Li walked to the stone wall and gently stroked it. A faint coquettish luster flashed away. There are a lot of broken demon crystals in the wall. They are so broken that they can't be mined. Is this Su Jinan's work, or? Su Li was a little more vigilant. After standing for a moment, she randomly chose a path and walked in. But after a few steps, her expression changed slightly. She pulled Su Mian out at a faster speed. Senior, Su Mian was confused. He didn't see anyone. Why did Su Li seem to be frightened? Su Li took a deep look at the deep cave entrance and turned to the second path. After a few steps, Su Li stopped again. It's the same chill. Is there a great crisis waiting for me at the end of each path? Suli looked at the dark depths with a cold face. This was definitely not the work of the sixth branch of the Su family. Senior, what's wrong with you? Su Mian looked at Su Li's face and finally realized that something was wrong. There was a trace of panic in his voice. Su Li gave him a comforting look and whispered, "Now, let's get out of this cave together and go back the way we came." "Yes, Senior." Although Su Mian didn't know why Su Li wanted to go back without finding anything halfway, he obeyed the order without hesitation and turned to go outside. But when he walked to the original fork, he was shocked. The way back disappeared. He ran to the smooth wall and touched the thick wall fiercely. Suddenly, he fell into a sluggish state. How could it be? Even immortals can't gamble on a mine in such a short time. We are trapped in it. Su Li looked at Su Mian's dazed look, and a trace of understanding flashed in her eyes. There is no trace of tactical matrix. Is it a demonic method? Su Li called Black Lotus in her heart, but Black Lotus Ring didn't appear. It only passed her an emotion. You are targeted by a mighty demon. Was it really a mighty demon? Su Li's pupil shrank suddenly, but she didn't panic much. The mighty demon only blocked the way back, which meant that it didn't want to kill her. It just forced her to meet him, but no one could tell what would happen after they met. Su Li took a deep breath and led Su Mian to the third fork. Since they were going to meet, it was the same no matter which of the three paths they took. The mighty demon just wanted to confuse Su Li and make her panic. However, it obviously underestimated Su Li. Su Mian followed Su Li. As they walked, he suddenly felt that the surrounding temperature was dropping, and the air was filled with an unpleasant smell, which made him a little absent-minded. He subconsciously approached Su Li and suddenly became sober. The air here is poisonous. If you are 10 meters away from me, you are likely to die. Be careful. Su Li's faint voice conveyed love. Su Mian's blood froze, and he immediately got closer to Su Li. He couldn't wait to stick to Su Li's back. Why is the experience completely different when I follow Senior into the mine? I'm just a scout in Juji realm. Su Mian felt wronged in his heart. He inadvertently looked at the wall, and the patterns on the wall suddenly squirmed, as if there were countless snakes swimming inside. The horrifying scene scared Su Mian so much that his voice changed. Senior, the wall moved. Huh. Su Li looked over, and the surrounding wall immediately stopped squirming. It was quiet, as if the scene just now had never happened. Senior, you have to believe me. The wall really moved. Su Mian said again and again with a sad face, for fear that Su Li didn't believe him. Su Li shook her head and walked to the wall. She touched the cold wall, but she didn't see the squirming picture. But the patterns on the wall were indeed different from before. Su Mian suppressed his fear and walked to Su Li. He looked at the wall for a long time. For some reason, he always felt that the patterns on the wall were very disgusting. Senior, the wall is so dirty and slippery. He touched the wall and turned his head, only to see Su Li looking at him with a strange look. Was that admiration? Chapter 452. Senior, what are you looking at? Su Mian was a little confused by his stare. After asking, he suddenly felt a slight weight on his shoulder, and a cold breath almost blew from his earlobes. What's that? Su Mian's scalp was numb, and he was about to turn his head subconsciously. At this moment, Su Li waved her hand, and his body immediately moved forward involuntarily. The thing on his shoulder also fell, and the sound of rolling came from behind him. He curiously wanted to turn back, but Su Li pressed the back of his head with one hand and walked to the depths of the tunnel. Don't look, or you won't be able to eat, Su Li said lightly and let go of the restraint. The more Su Mian listened to her, the more curious he was. Seeing that they were about to go far away, he finally couldn't restrain the restlessness in his heart and quietly glanced back. Just at this glance, he clearly saw the thing swimming on the ground behind him. What was that? How could it move when its face was hollowed out? Was its lower body a snake tail? A snake? Or a human? For a moment, Su Mion's face turned green. He suppressed his inner disgust and quickly walked behind Su Li, looking at her expressionless face. He couldn't help but admire her. Not everyone in the cultivation circle could see such a horrible thing, but the senior's expression didn't change at all. Su Li sped up for the next part of the way, not only because the thing in the darkness behind them was closely following them, but also because the breath emitted by the surrounding walls was getting worse. These things were not fatal to her. She hadn't been poisoned for a long time. Even if the snake venom in the air was very powerful, it was basically a decoration for her. But for Su Mion, it was not a good experience. She turned her head and glanced at Su Mion, who was in a trance. Obviously, he had fallen into the illusion. For a moment, she wanted to feed Su Mion some blood to try to detoxify him, but she immediately gave up the idea when she thought of the immortal tea plant. You don't want to kill me, but just want me to meet you as soon as possible. Su Li slightly narrowed her eyes, and a trace of thinking flashed through her eyes. An hour later, the mind controlled by the sixth branch was still in full swing. But deep in the mind, a psychological game was taking place. Walking through the corridor full of strange patterns, Su Li finally came to a cave. This place was filled with cold air. The cave was filled with icy blue icicles. The extreme coldness seemed to be able to penetrate through the bones. In the middle of the cave, there was a tree that seemed to be carved out of ice. Under the blue light, it looked like jade. Su Mion couldn't stay a moment longer and was soon frozen into a coma. It was convenient for Su Li to let the nightmare swallow him directly and avoid being disturbed. Su Li walked to the ice tree and looked at the cold pool in front of her. In such a low temperature, the pool was still sparkling and did not freeze. She immediately remembered a legend mentioned by Dongfang Wuxue. In the depths of the black stone forest, there was a cold pond that was so deep that its bottom could not be seen. At the bottom of the pond hid an extremely terrifying old monster. At the bottom of the pond? Su Li squatted down and looked at her reflection in the lake. Suddenly, the face in the lake changed into Su Li in the reincarnation mirror. Shua. Su Li stood up abruptly and looked around with gloomy eyes. Hee, don't be nervous. I'm just joking with you. The seductive voice came from the bottom of the lake and echoed in the cave as if it came from all directions. Su Li stared at the lake. The legend was true. Was there really a mighty monster at the bottom of the lake? Splash! The calm lake gradually rippled, and then the lake water churned and a shadow appeared. Su Li took a few steps back and looked at the snake man who jumped out of the lake. Or, a beauty with a snake and scorpion. Su Li looked at the mighty monster that Black Lotus said. The monster in front of her was half human and half demon. Its upper body was human, and it had a perfect and delicate face. It seemed to be the most pleasing work of art in the world. Just one glance could make people immersed in it and unable to extricate themselves. As for the lower half of its body, it was a thick snake tail covered in scales. Compared to its willow-like waist, the snake tail was as thick as a water bucket. It was covered in dark purple scales that were incomparably sharp and gave off a threatening chill. Although the monster did not emit much heavy pneuma, Su Li felt a pressure. This pressure did not come from the bloodline of the demon clan, but time. Black Lotus is right. This monster is an old monster who has lived for many years. Black Lotus, do you know him? Su Li tried to call Black Lotus, but only felt a sense of fear. Did Black Lotus not only know him, but was also afraid of him? Su Li's heart sank slightly, and her slightly relaxed mind became tense again. Little girl, I have been observing you for a long time. The big demon rested her snow-white arms beside the pool. A gentle smile appeared on her delicate face. Her crisp and sweet voice made people involuntarily intoxicated. My name is Zisha. Don't be afraid. Come and sit here. Su Li's eyes were clear. Instead of moving forward, she stepped back a few steps and said in a cold tone, Are you observing me? Seeing Su Li's reaction, Zisha was a little bored. She waved her hand and said, Well, if you want to stand and chat with me, then just stand. As soon as she finished speaking, the icicles on the walls of the cave suddenly melted. Countless half-snake, Half-human monsters with their faces hollowed out fell from above. In an instant, the entire cave was filled with the disgusting smell of blood. Only the area where Suli stood was clean. As Zisha said, she only left a space for Suli to stand still. Suli, I like your name very much. Since you left this forest last time, I have liked you. Zisha swayed her snake tail in the water, and her cheeks were red. She said happily, I threw out a lot of demon crystals to attract you. Sure enough, you came in less than a month. Suli looked at the joy on her face. It seemed that she was not pretending, but she did not feel lucky at all. The demon clan liked to eat people the most. Would she like a food? It was simply a fantasy. Zisha, Suli said slowly, and her tone was as cold as before. If you have anything to say, you might as well come straight to the point. Although you are a mighty demon, the cultivation circle is not suitable for you to stay. If you are exposed, there will be countless old ancestors of holy sects who want to keep you as a pet. So, if you want something, you might as well say it directly. If you have been watching me all the time, you will know that neither of us can afford to waste time. Why waste time? The cold words hit the nail on the head, and the relationship between the two was instantly revealed. The beautiful blush on Zisha's face faded away, and 2 rows of white teeth were revealed. It seems that you are not as simple as I thought. After you entered Yushu sect, your Numa disappeared for a period of time, and then you became more powerful. If I didn't really want to ask you for help, I would break your body to see what secrets are inside. Suli's body tightened. She did not speak, but her mind was slightly relaxed. This mighty demon really wanted to ask her for help. After a moment of silence, Suli said first, Why me? You have lived long enough. For countless years, I am definitely not the only one who came to the Blackstone Forest. Even many people left the Blackstone Forest last time. Little girl, I am very good at judging people. Zisha's vertical pupils glowed, and she licked her lips with her snake tongue. The taste of the human clan is very sweet, but there are many kinds. The flesh of mortals is coarse and the most unpalatable. What really tastes good is practitioners. The more talented practitioners are, the more tender their flesh is. Besides, there is an irresistible fragrance for our demon clan. You smell very fragrant. Suli's eyes changed, and she said sarcastically, You said this to a food. Aren't you afraid that I won't help you? As I said, I have been observing you for a long time. Zisha did not seem to be in a hurry at all, and she told all the reasons. Your character is very similar to mine. We are both people who will do whatever it takes to achieve our goals and abandon everything. The so-called restraint of reason doesn't exist for us at all. So, as long as I take out something that appeals to you, you will definitely help me, won't you? And I also know that your existence is not tolerated by the natural law. With the improvement of your cultivation, you will have nowhere to hide under the natural law, right? Zisha glanced at the broken reincarnation mirror on Suli's waist and giggled. A broken mirror alone can't help you resist much, but I can help you. Suli was silent until Zisha finished. She took a light breath after Zisha finished, and there was no panic on her face. She also showed a smile on her face. You deserve to be a mighty demon who has lived for tens of thousands of years. You can even see these in such a short time. But, Senior Zisha, are you going to let me promise first and then tell you the requirements? I like your calmness very much. Zisha fiddled with her slender nails, and her eyes were full of purple. What I want you to do is very simple. Help me attract the attention of the natural law. As long as you can hold on for a quarter of an hour, I can give you those rewards at any time. Attract the attention of the natural law? Suli's eyes changed. You want me to take the initiative to expose myself and attract the punishment of the natural law? What's the difference between that and death? Zisha picked her nails and giggled. But the snakes around her roared, Little girl, do you really think that you can walk out of here alive if you don't promise? Suli slightly pursed her lips and didn't speak. Zisha sighed and pointed to those roaring snakes. These are all your predecessors. Unfortunately, They either don't promise or fail. I can only let them accompany me in this way forever. In fact, I know people like you very well. When you know your fate, you will think all the time about how to escape from the punishment of the natural law if you are noticed by the natural law one day. Especially you, Suli, you are calm enough and your thinking is also meticulous. Others must think more about these questions. Maybe you can really escape from the punishment of the natural law. Anyway, you will die if you don't promise. Why don't you promise and have a try? Zisha's tone was gentle, and she persuaded Suli softly, as if she was really thinking about Suli. Suli looked silent. It was the first time that she faced a mighty ancient demon. She finally had the deepest understanding of the horror of this kind of existence. I promise you, but I have a requirement. Chapter 453. Zisha was stunned. Obviously, she didn't expect that Suli would agree so quickly. All the humans who had been trapped here by her in the past had either agreed or refused after a long struggle. Even if there were a few exceptions, they would remain calm on the surface, but their hearts would be full of uneasiness. With her talent, she could easily sense the emotional changes of these food. But from Suli, she could only feel calmness. She was really calm. It was as if her request was just a trivial thing like eating and drinking, and there was no life-threatening danger. What do you want to ask? Zisha's crystal eyes flickered, and she said with a smile, It's the first time for me to meet such an interesting person like you. In view of this, no matter what you ask, I will tell you the answer. Suli slightly raised the corner of her mouth. I have already thought about the question. What's your purpose of asking me to attract the attention of natural law? Zisha's smile on her face stagnated, and a rare trace of annoyance flashed through her eyes. But she recovered her smile in an instant and said softly, Little girl, I thought you would be smarter and wouldn't ask such a sensitive topic. You should know that if you really know the answer, even if you can survive the natural law, I will not let you go. I just want to know this. Suli looked at Zisha, ignoring the snakes around her who were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. I don't want to be an ignorant scapegoat. Scapegoat? Splash! Zisha swayed her tail and swam from the cold pool to the shore at an extremely fast speed, leaving a trail of water. Suli had no way to retreat, and could only let Zisha's perfect and frightening face appear 1 inch in front of her, almost sticking together. Suli could even see the boundless evil spirits rolling in Zisha's purple eyes, like the hell. I really can't see any fear in your eyes. Zisha's eyes left Suli, and she straightened up. She was 2 heads taller than Suli, and she looked down at Suli. You mentioned the scapegoat. It seems that you have guessed a lot of information. She waved her hand, and the surrounding snakes howled and brought a stone chair from nowhere to put in front of Suli. After Zisha sat down, her eyes were level with Suli. You human clan often say that natural law is constant. In my opinion, the heavenly Tao is just a bastard who likes to meddle in other people's business. As Zisha said, she deliberately slowed down her tone to observe Suli's reaction. But Suli actually nodded and said, Senior of the demon clan is right. I agree with you very much. This time, Zisha was really stunned. However, she quickly reacted and snorted. You're different from those rotten and pedantic scholars. It's rare for a human to agree with our Yao race's views. Suli nodded and continued, So, Senior, a mighty demon like you is not tolerated by the natural law like me. That's why Senior put demon crystals in the wall of the mine outside to block the detection of the heavenly Tao. But for so many years, Senior has a wish, and if this wish is to be fulfilled, it will definitely attract the attention of the heavenly Tao. So you need someone to attract the attention of the heavenly Tao, so that Senior will have time to do that. After Suli finished speaking in a calm tone, the whole cave fell into silence. Even the snake men who had been howling stopped and stared at Suli blankly. Although they had no faces, they exuded a sense of fear for no reason. You are very good. Zisha inhaled gently. Looking at the weak human in front of her, she didn't know what to say for a while. In the past 10,000 years, it's not that no one can guess my mind, but that they dare not. You are really bold. Su Li smiled gently, neither servile nor overbearing. Since Senior wants my help, you naturally won't hurt me. So, what's the harm for me to say a few more words? Zisha looked at Su Li coldly, and the chill gradually spread to her feet. Just when the snake men thought that their master would attack in anger, she actually laughed extremely cheerfully. Laughter that sounded like silver bells reverberated throughout the cave abode. You're very special. I'm really going to fall in love with you. If you weren't an anomaly, maybe I could let you live a few more years. As Zisha said, she threw out a ball-shaped crystal that emitted an amazing purple light. Integrate this thing into your tactical matrix, and it can make the tactical matrix exert several times the original effect. In addition to this, I also give you the practice resources of the human clan that I have accumulated over the years. As a reward, I will give it to you in advance, in case you have no life to use it. Su Li took the purple crystal, took out the tactical matrix plate for camouflage without saying anything, and integrated it into it. About an hour later, the crystal was completely integrated into the tactical matrix plate, and there were a lot more cracks on it. At most, it would be completely destroyed after a dozen times of use. I have to find other ways to isolate the natural law. Otherwise, when this tactical matrix is broken, it will be extremely difficult for me to take action. The thought flashed in Su Li's mind, and then she put away the tactical matrix plate. Facing Zisha's beautiful eyes full of appreciation, what do I need to do? The moon set and the sun rose. It was another early morning. At dawn, Su Li walked out of the mine as if there was no one else, and Zisha's charming voice was still echoing in her ears. Don't think about escaping. As long as you dare to leave Jojo region, I will definitely kill you before you leave. Don't underestimate the strength of the mighty demon. You still have a year to prepare. Think about how to escape from the natural law. A year was too long. Su Li sighed and turned to leave. Back to the camp of the 7th branch, Su Mian followed Su Li with a blank look and patted his head from time to time, like a fool. What happened last night? What's in that tunnel? Su Mian tried his best to think, but he had no memory. Seeing the camp of the 7th branch of Su family not far away, he suddenly felt a sense of familiarity and pity. It was rare for him to have an adventure with the senior, but he failed to stick to the end. Fortunately, the senior was kind enough to bring him out. After asking Su Mian to rest, Su Li came to the main tent, and Su Yuanhai, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately came to greet her. Master, you are back, he said with joy, and then his face suddenly changed. Master, there is an unpleasant smell on you. Did you take the demon crystal? Su Li was slightly stunned. She didn't feel it herself, but it must be the trouble caused by the purple crystal. She ran the all-spirits tactics in her mind, and the demon energy immediately disappeared from Su Yuanhai's perception. Master, the Pneuma is gone, Su Yuanhai said respectfully, and then asked, what should we do next? Although the demon crystal is valuable, you need to be alive to get it. Su Li smiled with coldness in her eyes. I was worried that there were too many branches in the Su family, and it was too troublesome to collect them all. So, I wanted to destroy some of them. You, Su Li said slowly. Su Yuanhai's eyelids twitched, and he was shocked. If it was true, then the Su family would be in big trouble. However, Su Yuanhai was not sad at all, but full of joy. Since his soul was controlled, only the interests of the master could affect his mood. Others, including his family and children. What's more, Su Yuanhai had no cultivation partner. He was destined to be Su Li's servant in this life. Su Li left quickly, but Su Yuanhai didn't leave. He was busy with the arrangement. On the surface, the 6th branch and the 7th branch were fighting in full swing as usual. The next morning, Su Jinan was cleaning up the demon crystals in the warehouse of the camp. He was still fantasizing about the resources he could exchange with these demon crystals and what realm he could reach. Suddenly, a scout disciple of the 6th branch ran in a panic and said loudly, Head, something bad happened. The camp of the 7th branch is empty, as if they all disappeared overnight. And the mind demon crystals are all piled up in the warehouse, untouched. What? Su Jinan looked back with his eyes slightly red. Take some people there immediately. No, I'll go there myself. Although the 6th branch occupied 80% of the demon crystal mine, the part mined by the 7th branch should not be underestimated. No matter how the people of the 7th branch disappeared, those demon crystals must not fall into the hands of others. Su Jinan had no time to think about it and rushed to the camp of the 7th branch with a large group of people. Soon after he left, the practitioner in the late stage of Yuanying realm, whom he invited, received the news. This person was Emol Yang, a casual practitioner. He had a good reputation in the cultivation circle and liked freedom. He was unwilling to be bound by the sect, so he practiced by helping others in daily life. Emol Yang was calm and was not blinded by interests. After listening to the description of the disciple of the 6th branch, he immediately noticed that something was wrong. However, Su Jinan had left the camp. If he left, he could not afford to be responsible for anything that happened to his own camp. After thinking about it over and over again, Emol Yang finally sighed and sat down on the spot. He said to himself worriedly, I hope it's okay. Su Jinan hasn't paid me yet. But sometimes, what he was afraid of happened. Shortly after he sat down, another disciple who was responsible for supervising the mining rushed in a panic. Senior, something terrible happened. Those spiritual stone mines have all turned into stones. Stones? Emol Yang's face changed wildly. He rushed out of the tent without saying anything and came to the mine. At a glance, he saw all the disciples of the 6th branch gathered in front of the mine's warehouse in a daze. The air was filled with dead silence. His face turned cold. Get out of the way. All the disciples immediately woke up and made way for him. Emol Yang rushed into the warehouse and saw the stones piled up in the warehouse. He was horrified and felt a chill rising from his feet. How could it be? My divine awareness has been covering the warehouse all the time. Who has such great ability? Who can replace all the demon crystals into stones under everyone's eyes? At this moment, a disciple who was responsible for guarding the warehouse stood up and said with a frightened face, Senior, these are the demon crystals. I saw with my own eyes that the demon aura on the demon crystals was quickly lost and turned into a pile of stones in the blink of an eye. It seems that all the demon aura was sucked away by something in an instant. Hearing this, Zisha, who was hiding in the depths of the cold pond, licked her lips. Her goal had been achieved. She naturally had to take back the bait she released. Did the lowly human clan want to use her demon crystals to practice? No way. Chapter 454. They were sucked away? Emol Yang looked at the disciple of the 6th branch strangely. If many disciples didn't nod around him, he would definitely think that this disciple was lying through his teeth. Even if you are telling the truth, someone will prove it for you. Emol Yang took a deep breath and felt a headache. Who would believe it? He could see that Su Jinan valued these demon crystals more than his own life. If he knew that all the demon crystals mined by the 6th branch turned into stones, wouldn't he go crazy? Su Jinan was indeed crazy. Su Jinan lowered his head and suppressed the anger in his heart. He knelt on the ground and squeezed out 2 words from his teeth. Old ancestor. You still know that I am your old ancestor. The hawk-nosed elder who came suddenly snorted. A moment later, Su Dian floated over. Seeing the empty camp of the 7th branch, her expression changed slightly. However, she couldn't ask more questions in this situation. If Dian and Yuan Hai didn't inform me secretly, how long are you going to keep it a secret? The hawk-nosed elder said coldly and looked at Su Jinan with displeasure. Su Yuan Hai also reported it secretly to the old ancestor? Su Dian was a little relieved when she heard the words. It seemed that it was not as she thought. Su Yuanhai should have left with others. Just when Su Dian spoke, the hawk-nosed elder waved his sleeves and swept open the door of the camp warehouse under Su Jinan's unwilling gaze. A smell of spiritual stones came to their faces. The hawk-nosed elder, who was supposed to be happy, suddenly looked uglier than a pig's liver. Su Jinan! The hawk-nosed elder shouted. Before Su Jinan could react, he saw a palm as big as a cattail leaf fan rapidly enlarging in front of him. Slap! Su Jinan's right face was slapped hard, and he flew far away with his body. He lay on the ground and spat out a mouthful of blood. He looked up dizzily with a confused look. Why did the old ancestor hit me? Su Jinan, how dare you? The hawk-nosed elder was sure that it was Su Jinan. He appeared in front of Su Jinan and was about to attack him again. Su Dian saw that the situation was not good and hurried to stop him. Old ancestor, calm down. Is there any misunderstanding? Misunderstanding? The hawk-nosed elder looked at Su Jinan and sneered as if he was looking at a dead man. Su Jinan, how dare you play such tricks in front of me? Su Dian finally noticed that something was wrong. She quickly walked to the warehouse and gasped when she saw the warehouse full of stones and a few low-grade spiritual stones. Did Su Jinan want to die? Could it be Su Yuanhai? Su Dian was worried. At this time, the hawk-nosed elder spoke again. I thought Yuanhai's worry was unnecessary. I didn't expect that you would be so crazy for these demon crystals. You even deceived me. Lie? Old ancestor, I didn't lie to you. Su Jinan sensed the killing intent in the old ancestor's words and finally panicked. He knelt down with a quiver and kowtowed again and again. Old ancestor, please forgive me. It's my fault to conceal the demon crystals. But Junior really didn't lie to you. You dare to quibble? The hawk-nosed elder picked up Su Jinan and threw him in front of the warehouse. How do you explain these stones? Su Jinan was dumbfounded when he saw the warehouse full of stones. Then he shook his head crazily and shouted, Old ancestor, I didn't do it. It must be Su Yuanhai. He did it. I just got here and had no time to exchange the demon crystals in the warehouse. I knew you would quibble like this. The hawk-nosed elder didn't ease his expression at all. He slapped Su Jinan heavily again. Su Jinan flew far away and kept coughing up blood. This time, he was obviously more seriously injured than last time. He couldn't get up after a long time. Su Yuanhai is a good boy. He knows that he is unlucky and knows what he should take and what he shouldn't. In order to prove that he had nothing to do with the demonic crystals, he purposely gathered all the Qin Kuan rings of his disciples together. He even invited me to the 7th room for a while. My divine sense could not have missed any demonic qi. He did not take a single demonic crystal. The hawk-nosed elder looked gloomy when he said this. So, you still want to say that you didn't do it? Su Jinan opened his mouth and only felt bitterness in his mouth. The bitterness reached his heart. He turned his head and stared at Su Dian with resentment. It seemed that he wanted to vent all his grievances and resentment on Su Dian. Su Dian frowned and thought that Su Jinan was really crazy. He dared to show hostility to her at this time. Wasn't he afraid of the old ancestor's anger? Su Jinan still wanted to live. The 2 slaps had completely woken him up. He got up and knelt on the ground. He bowed deeply to the hawk-nosed elder and said in a muffled voice, Old ancestor, I didn't do it. Old ancestor, please check it carefully and make a conclusion. If you really find out that I did it, I am willing to die. Hearing this, the hawk-nosed elder's expression finally eased a little. He frowned and took Su Jinan to the camp of the 6th branch. Su Yuanhai's demon crystals are lost. You can't lose yours too, can you? Put away the demon crystals first, and I will check it carefully. Thank you, old ancestor. Su Jinan breathed a sigh of relief. It didn't feel good to have a trip to the gates of hell. Su Dian, who was behind him, suddenly had a bad feeling when she heard this. Could it be? As soon as this thought flashed through Su Dian's mind, she heard the old ancestor's angry roar from the camp of the 6th branch. Su Jinan, you're courting death. Boom. In front of the warehouse of the sixth branch, a palm print appeared on Su Jinan's chest. Then he flew backward like a cannonball. The huge force made his eyes protrude. He fell on his back, and blood gushed out like it was free. Boom! The camp seemed to be flattened by Su Jinan's body. For a moment, countless disciples of the sixth branch were killed and wounded. The old ancestor was really angry. Seeing the bright red in the ruins, Su Dain couldn't help but turn pale and feel cold. She involuntarily retreated to the outside of the camp of the sixth branch and watched the development of the situation. Cough, cough, cough. In the ruins, Su Jinan crawled out, struggling at death's door. He stared at the warehouse full of stones. He couldn't understand why those valuable demon crystals suddenly turned into stones overnight. Emoliang stood at the side, his face pale. Why did the old ancestor of the Su family come here at this time? How could he explain the absurd reason? The hawk-nosed elder glanced at Emoliang's face for a moment. Then he moved his eyes away and walked to Su Jinan. He said coldly, "Where are the demon crystals? Tell me, and I will spare your life for the sake of your years of service to the Su family. If you don't tell me, you will die." Su Jinan's face was terribly pale. He still didn't know what had happened, but in order to save his life, he had to brace himself and said, "Old ancestor, I wouldn't dare to deceive you even if I ate a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. I can guarantee with my life that none of those demon crystals fell into my hands. Someone must have hindered me and wanted me to cut off my arms and legs. Old ancestor, please think twice. You didn't deceive me? You sure have a glib tongue, pushing everything away cleanly." The hawk-nosed elder snorted coldly, but his face softened. "I won't easily kill you. Since it is you who have committed the disappearance of the demon crystals, you should atone for your crime by meritorious deeds. I give you 3 days to find out the whereabouts of the demon crystals. If you can't find them, the whole sixth branch will pay with their lives. Only in this way can I calm the anger of those who come from other big regions. Do you understand? Other big regions?" Su Jinan's eyes widened and he spat out more blood. "How could it be? I clearly..." Humph! The hawk-nosed elder waved his sleeves, turned around, and scolded coldly, "You are so stupid. There is no impenetrable wall in the world. Do you really think that the sixth branch is really an iron plate? The matter of the demon crystals has long been known by the practitioners of other big regions and even holy sections. You concealed it and brought great trouble to the Su family. If the Su family is destroyed because of you, Su Jinan, will be the biggest sinner of the Su family. Think about it with your blockhead." Hearing this, Su Jinan was completely stunned. It's just a demon crystal mine. He didn't expect that a moment of greed would put him in a desperate situation. Head of the sixth branch, you, take care of yourself. Su Dain sighed and turned to look at the hawk-nosed elder. There was a trace of pleading in her beautiful eyes. The hawk-nosed elder wanted to go directly back to the main branch. But when he saw Su Dain's eyes, he stopped and sighed. "Well, I'll go to the second branch. I haven't visited the second branch for a long time since your grandma died. By the way, I can see how Su Jiuzhou's injury is. I didn't expect you to praise her so much." "Thank you, old ancestor." Su Dain was overjoyed and responded with joy. "Thank you, old ancestor." "Ho ho!" The hawk-nosed elder smiled and temporarily put the matter of the demon crystals aside. He waved his sleeves and disappeared with Su Dain instantly. Only the wailing from the camp echoed in the black stone forest. Emoliang stood still like a sculpture. When the hawk-nosed elder disappeared from his sensing range, he breathed a sigh of relief, as if he had come back to life. He looked at the disciples of the sixth branch lying on the ground. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly found that his back was cold and wet. It's right that I don't join any sect or family. After this incident, he was more determined to stick to his idea. While thinking, Emoliang walked to Su Jinan, helped him up, and fed him a healing elixir. Su Jinan refined the elixir for a while, and his face became ruddy. But he didn't continue to heal himself. Instead, He opened his eyes and said calmly, "Fellow practitioner Imo, you can go now. Don't mention that you have been here after you leave." Imo Liang was slightly stunned, head of the sixth branch. A trace of mockery flashed across Su Jinan's pale face. "Old ancestor didn't vent his anger on you. Don't you understand?" Imo Liang was horrified. "You mean?" Su Jinan smiled bitterly. What he said immediately made Imo Liang fall into an ice cave. "I violated the taboo. It's fine if I can hand over the demon crystals to make amends. If I can't, the Su family must give an explanation to the practitioners of the big regions. I'm the best scapegoat. But if the old ancestor hurt you, there will be more trouble. So you escaped." Chapter 455. Speaking of this, Su Jinan covered his mouth and coughed up a lot of blood, but he continued regardless. "But those angry practitioners in the big region won't care whether you have nothing to do with it or not. If you continue to stay here, your life will be in danger. So, hurry up and leave." Head of the sixth branch, you. Imo Liang was moved. Then he thought of something and said quickly, "But those demon crystals have become empty shells. Many people of the sixth branch have seen that the demonic aura in the demon crystals has been sucked away by something. If there is no accident, all the demon crystals in the mine have become ordinary stones. You can use this as an explanation. It's useless. You are too naive, fellow practitioner Imo." Su Jinan shook his head. "Unless I can find the thing that has sucked away the demonic aura, you don't have to worry about this matter. I will take full responsibility for my mistake. You are just a practitioner invited by me. Why do you have to get involved?" Imo Liang stared at Su Jinan blankly. After a long time, he stood up and solemnly cupped his hands to salute, saying, "It's ridiculous that I listened to the slander outside and said that the Su family is full of bullshit. Now that I met the head of the sixth branch, I know that what you hear is false, and what you see is true. The head of the sixth branch is righteous, and you are a model for all practitioners. Although I have helped once this time, it is far less than the help of the head of the sixth branch. I don't want the reward. Head of the sixth branch, take care." After finishing the last sentence, Imo Liang cupped his hands and left without saying anything. He quickened his pace and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Among the practitioners, there were few righteous people, but many selfish ones. Su Jinan struggled to get up and tried to refine healing elixirs regardless of the dirt on his body. It seemed that he was really kind and let Imo Liang leave. There were many casualties in the camp, but more were unharmed. The half of the destroyed camp was quickly rebuilt. Su Jinan moved to the main tent and took out all the elixirs he had to heal himself. When the sun rose, most of his injuries had been healed. He didn't have time to care about the elixirs. He immediately summoned his confidant and ordered with a gloomy face, "Be prepared for both sides. If you can't satisfy the old ancestor, push Imo Liang out." This person fled with all the demon crystals 2 days ago. Everyone was fooled by him. Do you understand? I understand. After that, Su Jinan staggered to his feet and walked toward the mine. Compared to sect cultivators, rogue cultivators are really too naive. Su Jinan laughed in a low voice. It was hard to tell whether he was laughing at Imo Liang or himself. At this moment, Su Dain and the hawk-nosed elder arrived at the gate of the second branch. Seeing that the courtyard that was supposed to be Su Li's residence turned into ruins, Su Dain's expression changed slightly, and she immediately flew over. The hook-nosed old man narrowed his eyes and followed behind unhurriedly. What's going on? Why was Su Jiuzhou's residence destroyed? Where is Su Jiuzhou? Su Dain flew over the ruins and smelled a trace of blood. Her face suddenly became gloomy, and she immediately turned and flew to the mountain peak where she lived. Before the figure approached, Su Dain saw a gray, flowing light flying out and landing in front of her. Soul formation stage? Seeing the gray, flowing light, the hawk-nosed elder, who was indifferent, changed his expression immediately. After Su Dain's grandmother died, there was a soul formation stage cultivator behind her. While he was surprised, the gray light dissipated, and the extremely ordinary face of the middle-aged man in linen appeared. But the hawk-nosed elder was even more shocked. He is so young, and he has the potential to pass the test. Uncle Guang, did you take action? Seeing the middle-aged man in linen flying out openly, Su Dayin immediately understood something, and her nervous expression eased a little. The middle-aged man in linen nodded and glanced at the hawk-nosed elder behind her. After a signal with his eyes, he said, "It's a little complicated. You and this fellow practitioner of Su family, follow me." All right. Hearing the way the middle-aged man in linen called him and what Su Dayin said before, the hawk-nosed elder vaguely guessed the relationship between them. He nodded with a smile and motioned the middle-aged man to lead the way. Seeing this, the middle-aged man in linen showed no extra expression on his face. He turned around and landed in the courtyard of the mountain peak. Su Dayin's mother, who was worried, was delighted when she saw Su Dayin. Then, she was shocked when she saw the hawk-nosed elder behind her. She was about to salute, but the hawk-nosed elder stopped her before she got up. "Don't be so polite. Speaking of which, you are my adopted daughter-in-law. I should be thankful that you don't blame me after so many years of absence." The hawk-nosed elder smiled, and Su Dayin's mother also showed a smile on her face. She reluctantly responded, "Old ancestor, how can we blame you as juniors?" "That's great, hee." The middle-aged man in linen stood aside and didn't speak. He naturally knew that the hawk-nosed elder was so kind for his sake, and there must be some misunderstanding. However, he didn't intend to explain. He directly pushed the door open and let Su Xianyun and Su Jing out. "Master!" Seeing Su Dayin, the two who were depressed immediately cheered up and surrounded her. Then they saw the hawk-nosed elder and saluted in shock. "Old ancestor." The hawk-nosed elder nodded. "What happened? Tell me the details. Since I came here, I can't ignore it." Su Xianyun immediately told what happened before in detail. He was eloquent and portrayed Su Dingchuan's domineering attitude deeply. Even Su Zheng, who experienced the scene himself, couldn't help but admire him secretly. If it were up to him, he would definitely not be as vivid as the eldest senior fellow apprentice. The hawk-nosed elder frowned. "According to what you said, Su Dingchuan is indeed unfair. Su Dingxian wantonly killed the genius disciples of our Su family, and this matter will not be tolerated. Where is Su Jiuzhou? Also, where did Wenbing go?" Su Dayin couldn't help but ask after Su Xianyun didn't mention these two people for a long time. As soon as the words came out, Su Xianyun's face suddenly became extremely gloomy, and he couldn't speak for a while. Su Zheng directly stood up and said with hatred, "Master, Wenbing." "Bah, Su Wanbing is ungrateful. He not only lied through his teeth and smeared Su Jiuzhou, but also betrayed you and directly joined Su Dingxian's faction." "What?" Su Dayin's body shook slightly, as if she couldn't believe what Su Zheng said. What are you talking about?" "Master," Su Xianyun said bitterly, "junior fellow apprentice is right. Third junior fellow apprentice betrayed us. Su Jiuzhou saved the lives of the three of us, and it is untenable because of his interference. Su Dingxian can take this opportunity to make trouble. As for Su Jiuzhou, she is missing." Su Dayin listened blankly and was speechless for a long time. She only left for a few days. How could such a big change happen in the family? The hawk-nosed elder listened with relish. After everyone was silent, he said first, "In this case, only by finding Su Jiuzhou can we know whether Su Dingxian lied or not. If Su Jiuzhou is not as unbearable as they said, but her foundation is not damaged and there is still a chance to recover, then I will take care of this matter to the end." "Dayin, don't worry." As he said, he turned to look at the middle-aged man in linen and finally revealed his purpose. He asked gently, "Fellow practitioner, may I know your name?" The middle-aged man in linen didn't answer him immediately, but looked at Su Dayin's mother, who seemed to be thinking about something. After a while, he turned his head and said expressionlessly, "My surname is Ling. It turns out to be fellow practitioner Ling," the hawk-nosed elder echoed, seeming to distinguish the truth of this sentence. Then he also said his name. "I'm Su Chengke, the grand elder of Su family. I don't think you are from Jiuzhou region, right? The middle-aged man in linen shook his head. I'm just a casual practitioner. Su Chunka's eyes suddenly brightened when he heard this. Are you interested in being the guest grand elder of Su family? Don't worry, I'm going to find Su Jiuzhou. The middle-aged man in linen didn't wait for Su Chunka to continue and turned to leave the yard. The smile on Su Chunka's face froze, but he recovered quickly. He walked to Su Dian's mother with a smile and asked, Xiaoru, how do you know fellow practitioner Ling? Is it convenient for you to tell me? Su Dian's mother was in a dilemma, but due to Su Chunka's identity, she had to say, it's not a secret. I did him a little favor. I don't know why he stayed. What favor? Su Chunka became serious, and there was a trace of aggressiveness in his tone. Su Dian froze aside and was anxious. She didn't know how to help her mother get through this hurdle. She didn't expect that Su Chunka would show such a face as soon as he saw Uncle Guang. He not only poached Uncle Guang in front of her, but also asked about Uncle Guang's origin. At this moment, Su Dian had a strong premonition that Su Chunka's coming to the second branch might not only not help her, but also bring her big trouble. After the middle-aged man in linen went down the mountain, he came to a mortal city. Both Su Dian and Su Xianyun believed in Su Jiuzhou. He believed in Su Dian's ability. Since Su Jiuzhou was not what Su Dingxian's branch said, he could think about it the other way around. Then the woman must have sensed something and left the sphere of influence of the second branch in advance. She was seriously injured and lost her cultivation, so she couldn't escape far. The best hiding place is the mortal city. The middle-aged man in linen's eyes flashed, and he looked up at the city plaque. Desu City. There was only one word difference between this name and the place called Desu Town in his memory. The middle-aged man in linen was in a trance for a moment, but he restrained himself in an instant. It's a ridiculous dream. I should have forgotten it long ago. Thinking of this, the middle-aged man in linen lifted his feet and walked into the city gate. The two soldiers guarding the city saw that he looked ordinary but had an extraordinary momentum, so they didn't step forward to court death. A top-notch 100 refined sword, selling it cheaply, freshly made sugar-coated haws. It's free if it's not sweet. The peace and joy of the mortal city seemed to have nothing to do with the cold, sinister, and deceitful circle of practitioners. They operated in two different worlds. Perhaps the middle-aged man in linen controlled his emotions in advance. His face didn't fluctuate as before. He walked through the crowd expressionlessly, and his divine awareness unscrupulously swept over the houses and pavilions. Suddenly, he froze. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.